Henry of Skalitz, a blacksmith's son who worked his way up the social ladder on a hunt for those responsible for the sacking of his village and murder of his parents, is sent by Sir RETROSPECTIVE Cobbler, his real father, we'll get into it, to go with Sir Hans Capon of Perkstein, otherwise known as the Lord of Lipa and rightful heir to Rattay, as his squire to deliver a letter to Otto von Berghof in an attempt to work towards peace between regions and to gain an ally in their attempt to restore to the throne of Bohemia King Wenceslas IV, who historically did not take after his father and neglected affairs of state for more frivolous pursuits, etc, etc. And their second mission, or I guess their first mission, of removing from the throne Sigismund of Luxembourg, the half-brother of Wenceslas who deposed him and threw him in jail 3 years prior to take the throne, and also the man responsible for the burning of Henry's village Skalitz in the event that caused the death of his parents at the hands of Sigismund's right hand, Markvart von Aulitz. I'm aware that's a lot of information, isn't it? I'm not sure why I opened with that, actually. I was just sort of trying to get it all straight in my own head. This conflict was central to Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. We observe across that game tons of people who have been affected by Sigismund and his army of Cumans, mercenaries for hire, who've pillaged across the Sasau region where the first game is set. It makes Sigismund a clear foe, the man who deposed our king and destroyed Henry's home, someone to work towards taking down. It's lucky to be on the side of the good guys. Henry's in an odd spot where the game begins. He's loyal to his company and to his liege lord and father in RETROSPECTIVE, and of course, despite being technically his squire, has a best friend for life in Sir Hans Capon. But he still feels tormented by the events he couldn't control, by the revenge he so desperately seeks, even against the wishes of his adoptive father Martin, who comes to him in dreams and visions. Henry's conscience manifesting as the man who raised him, trying to guide him, his subconscious attempting to steer him right down a path that was thrust onto him. It's core to Henry's journey and something he has to grapple with across the game. Henry tells himself it's for righteous reasons, that he's doing the good will of his liege lord. But is that really true? How do you navigate these complex emotions caused by terrible grief at such a young age? As the player, that's partly up to you, but will you make the right choices? Hans is struggling too, although we don't quite see it yet. It's something that has to be discovered over time. He wants to prove he's got what it takes, to make his uncle Hanush proud, to deliver the letter, to prove he's not a child anymore. He can lead a company, he can negotiate with lords, he's worthy of Rattay, which is why you see him falling back on his nobility. Things he feels can prop him up, despite his lack of confidence and experience. Audentes fortuna juvat. Fortune favors the brave. He learned Latin, he was educated. Surely that'll help him out here, right? Otherwise, why did he learn it? His nobility has to make him stronger, and he wields it like a sword and shield. It's a simple task: deliver a letter and ride back to Rattay. Hope that von Berghof sees their point of view and joins them in their mission against Sigismund, and to restore the rightful and just king to the throne. I'm sure it's just that simple. This introduction works as the game's Skalitz, in that it functions as a tutorial, but unlike Skalitz, I don't think this game hides its tutorialization quite as well. The introduction to KCD1 is a mini sandbox that establishes the game's framework. It's a microcosm of what Kingdom Come is as a whole, and other than keeping you within Skalitz, unless you do this shit, it allows you to just figure it all out, and is really how the game is supposed to be played. KCD has elements of an immersive sim mixed with traditional RPG mechanics, and the game wants you, as the player, to think and be careful, and Skalitz explains a ton of its core mechanics completely organically. KCD2 doesn't do a bad job by any means, and I think given the context of how you start, it navigates it incredibly well, but I did feel at points, okay, yeah, this is very clearly a tutorial, and that can break immersion. In KCD1, a lot of the tutorialization works because Henry is learning this stuff for the first time, but in KCD2, especially with combat, it's stuff you know, but is trying its hardest to teach new people while not feeling like a retread, and it comes off as inorganic. I'm not saying it does it to an unplayable degree, and I'm not saying it does it a lot, but it does happen. I also think the way it recaps the first game is probably its biggest pitfall. I don't know how natural this dialogue feels to someone who's never played the first game, but for me, it felt so obvious they were just trying to fill in new players and kind of made me cringe a little. The dialogue in KCD1 and KCD2 is by and large tremendous, but this felt like they were talking directly to the player in a very obtuse way. I think I would have preferred a simple recap option on the main menu. Don't obfuscate your setup and character work with jarring and stilted dialogue, where they talk about specific major events from the first game. It just feels wrong.
No doubt you're going to tell us again how the perfidious Istvan Toth stole your sword. And I thought you'd come round to thinking about other things.
That sword is the only reminder I had of Pa. We forged it together, just before he was slain. But that's another matter.
But this only really suffers for the first half of the introduction. Once Hans and Henry go to bathe and the camp is attacked by cutthroats, a band of no-good bandits killing the rest of the company and then going to rape an innocent woman. Oh. Wait. Well, that's unexpected. Henry and Hans swim away and escape through the rocks. A scuffle with one of the bandits and a fall sends Henry into a reflective dream on where he's come from and where he needs to go. Hans comes to his rescue and carries him, wounded and weary, through the woods as hallucinations cloud his vision, doing a much better job at organically filling in the player on the first game than the scuffed dialogue ever could. We see how much this grief is still very much soldered to his heart and weighs him down. Waking up in the herb woman Božena's hut, injured and on death's door, we have to now work our way to recovery. This sequence, I feel, is superior to Skalit's. I think it works in the stakes of the story established thus far and creates a sense of urgency and personal investment without dropping the slow pacing that makes Kingdom Come tick. It's a tightrope walk, and they balance on it pretty flawlessly. It teaches us how dialogue functions, the consequences of our actions, gives us a little bit of combat if you fuck up the choices like I did, and allows you to very slowly acclimatize yourself to the careful and thoughtful nature of the game's design. Picking flowers, burying bodies, mixing potions, reading people, and speaking with intent, and above all, engaging your brain. This sequence in and around Božena's hut introduces you to all of that, introduces you to how you're supposed to play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and I think it does it wonderfully. There's more to discuss in depth with these topics, but I wanted to first set the narrative scene. Once Hans has recovered, and Henry too, we thank Božena and Pavlena for their kindness and vow to repay them someday, and off we head to Trosky Castle to finally deliver our letter to von Berghoff. The game finally opens here. We see a gorgeous, pre-rendered cinematic of the countryside as our duo make their way to the castle. This world is beautiful, and the way it's often framed by these cinematics is tenfold what the first game did. You can feel the increased budget and expertise on display here. This certainly isn't a Kickstarter game anymore. You can feel the love in every inch of scenes like this. It gives the world character before we can explore. It gives the country heart and soul and makes us want to see it all as soon as we can. Once at the castle, the two are denied entry. With no retinue or horses or even proper clothes, they're assumed to be rabble, that they're lying. Henry, of course, is used to this treatment, and despite being frustrated, begins thinking of next steps. Meanwhile, Hans kinda loses it. I mean, one of his only strengths is being a noble, and now he doesn't even have that. He feels lost and like a failure, inferior to Henry, who was born nothing but a blacksmith's son in a small village. This begins to create a rift between the two, Hans lashing out and putting Henry down because of his own insecurities. They need money. They need clothes, although I'd argue Hans is fine like this. They need to speak to von Berghoff, and they need to make their way home, and so Henry takes on a small job. Hans doesn't want a part in it. He's so frustrated and clinging on to the only thing he has, his nobility, and so this manifests as stubbornness. He refuses to carry the sacks from the cart, he refuses to back down when insulted by a soldier, and it ends in a fight that lands the two of them in the stocks in the center of Troskowitz. Hans still refuses to admit he was wrong, and this pushes the two of them apart. When they're freed, Hans leaves, and Henry is alone, and this is where the game truly begins. With nothing, no gear, no money, no horse, no clothes, no dignity or respect, and you just have to figure it out. KCD 1 started you low, but KCD 2 starts you lower, and it just fucking works. Here you are, in a strange region, alone and with nothing to your name. What are you gonna do next? This is the opening of Kingdom Come 2, and by God is it captivating. On a narrative level, presentational level, and structural level, it seems to have learned all the right lessons from the first game without compromising artistic intent, and that's remarkable in this day and age. Too many games will twist and turn to appeal to the masses, but not Warhorse. They have a vision, and it won't be compromised. Kingdom Come 2 is one of those rare sequels that feels like a sequel, like it was made for people who loved the first game by people who were proud of the first game, and the power that approach holds can't be understated. And so I was in, ready to explore, ready to make my way back to where I was, to put the pieces back together. But where the fuck did I start? Trosky is the first region in the game, as Kingdom Come Deliverance has two maps, both roughly the size of KCD 1, although Trosky is maybe a tad smaller. Regardless, the ambition is through the roof here, and while these aren't the biggest maps of all time, they are certainly some of the most detailed, and that is so fucking welcome. I don't think I need to hammer home to you how too many open world games need the biggest map ever created, and even when they scale it back a bit, it's still too fucking big. Calm down, why was this necessary? Dropping off hare's foots at the Cernily offering altar is my favorite side activity in gaming history. You're never going to convince me that bigger equals better in all ways that can be applied, when I cannot think of a single time it's the case. Bigger worlds are never good because of their size. It's purely incidental, and usually worlds that are massive lack in the areas that matter. Worlds like KCD and KCD2 are such a treat, at a scale that feels vast without compromising on intentionality and handcrafted design. And where Kingdom Come Deliverance excelled, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 excels even further. But we'll talk about Kuttenberg later. For now, let's look at Trosky. Like I mentioned before, the world is gorgeous, and while I'm a major advocate for graphics not being necessary for a compelling game, when a major part of your game is immersing you within history, making your game look this good, this real, helps immensely. Although, because I record my footage on PC through Shadowplay, which isn't lossless, my PC footage never looks as clean and crisp as it should, even when the settings are maxed out and I'm running it at 4K. It's always a little blurry, like this. I mean, which pixel is the tree? Because I don't know. I know I should probably use OBS to record, but it tanks my frame rate. I just need to upgrade my PC, but my girlfriend won't let me because she literally hates me, and that's the reason. Don't ask her to verify that. But it's not just pretty to look at, it's incredibly detailed too, as was the first game. And I think people can often miss the larger artistic meaning in how the world is designed. In KCD1, the world was the allure, losing yourself in an almost perfect recreation of Bohemia during the Middle Ages. We'd never really seen anything quite like it. Most games set during history take liberties in one way or another, and despite being immersive when looked at by real historians, they usually fall short of the mark. KCD, though? That shit was impressive, and that was also the point. Most games and forms of media have an artistic message which is curated by the author, by the artist themselves. The Last of Us is about what The Last of Us is about. It's a story which guides you through a set of events, and despite your interaction, and despite The Last of Us playing with ludonarrative in remarkable ways, it's always about one thing, and you feel that out as you go, something written by a writer to evoke a certain feeling, and for you to come to a certain conclusion. KCD wasn't really like that. It had themes and a story, but the true artistic purpose was far more in how the world was built and how you interacted with it. The world being a true-life representation of history allowed the player to form their own conclusions about its people, about our history, about society, and about what it is to be human. I think if traditional means of storytelling like The Witcher or The Last of Us is more akin to a painting that takes an image and conveys it through an artist's own personal lens of expression, Kingdom Come Deliverance is more like a photograph, one that is still taken by an artist that is framed and lined up by someone trying to capture something in a specific way, but that is no longer pure expression. It's also truth and reality. Kingdom Come Deliverance was always that to me. It's the world laid bare, honestly. You connect more with the image itself than you do the artist's expression of the image. Despite the expression being core to your experience, it's never at the forefront, it's just lingering quietly in the background. The hills are gorgeous, the country feels freeing, the forests are dense, the towns and villages are full of life, the interiors have that human touch with rough edges and cracks in the stone. The only thing KCD2 misses that were one of my favourite parts of the first game are the churches. You cannot visit the interior of any churches in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which feels kind of insane. In a period when faith was such a major part of the world and its arts, not letting us explore the insides of all of the churches in the kingdom feels bizarre. No unique frescoes, no special ornamentation, only the exterior. I originally wrote this script before any of the DLC came out. I know it took me a while, but a lot of people speculated that one of the DLCs, Mysteria Ecclesiae, could be when they introduced the interiors of religious structures. They didn't. Even if they had, I think that would be bad. Sectioning off interiors for DLC isn't a good thing, but I never really thought this would be the case. I think cuts had to be made somewhere, and for whatever reason, churches were the thing that got the axe. And I can sympathize more with that than the former, because if it turned out I had to pay extra to go inside of churches 12 months after release, then you can get fucked. I mean, obviously not really, and I'd pay for it because I got the gold edition, but still, on principle, that sucks, even if I am the sucker in this situation. Although, that did not happen, they just got cut, which sucks, but doesn't feel sinful. You get it? Because churches, they do allow for the exploration of the Sedlet's monastery, though, in the DLC, so that's something, but it doesn't fix the actual issue. Speaking of the DLC, by the way, that's the Patreon companion video. If you finish this one and want more, I have a whole in-depth video the same as this, specifically for the DLCs on Patreon, so there you go. I think there is really unique artistic merit in trying to capture history the way Kingdom Come Deliverance did, and how Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 does, in a way that I don't think any other history-based game has ever done before. You can read literature about a period, you can watch a documentary about it, and those things are still valuable, of course. This isn't a replacement for real historical research, but being able to step into a period, into history laid bare this way, is huge. To feel the humanity of a period, to live it, which is what KCD is all about as an RPG, and the way it blends reality with its fiction in a way that doesn't compromise the photograph of history is endlessly compelling. If a well-researched book is learning about history, KCD is feeling history, and that's an important distinction. And that window into history, the way it depicts its world, directly informs game design itself and the mechanics at play. It's interesting because if you watched my Assassin's Creed 2 video, I discuss in that Assassin's Creed 2 often compromises itself. It strips elements that were core to Assassin's Creed 1, and it feels like it chased broader appeal. And part of me expected KCD 2 to do the same, but I was pleasantly surprised that it didn't, at least not totally. I can understand that it's slightly less hardcore than KCD 1 was, and part of that comes from the game being less janky and more streamlined, which I will concede often saps games of their soul, but I think where KCD 2 streamlines its design to be more approachable, it doesn't completely flatten itself in the process, and I think you can tell this is the case by just reading casual players' comments on KCD 2 videos either on YouTube Shorts or TikTok. I've found that's a good way to gauge the opinion of the common gamer. I'm really trying to be kind here, because there's a fair few people who are not huge fans of a few choice mechanics, and I think that speaks to how the game managed to reel people in a way the first didn't, but didn't compromise itself to suit those newcomers, and so people who are not willing to be open to different experiences weren't very happy. A core part of Kingdom Come Deliverance, and even more so in KCD 2, is its realism. If KCD is a photograph, then its mechanics have to mirror that. I don't think you can craft a world this realistic and not have mechanics that are on the same level of realism. I believe KCD's life simulation mechanics and its world design are in harmony. They inform each other. This shit has come under fire a lot. Since KCD 2 is a lot more popular than KCD 1, it's been played by tons of streamers and covered by far more YouTubers, and has just become a whole bigger game than the first ever was in the gaming industry. And while I think that's great, KCD deserves a spotlight, it brings with it a whole horde of people who don't want to engage with video games as art and want the most frictionless experience possible at the detriment of that art. And that's fine, but you're also a coward, and here's why you're wrong. I stopped trying to be kind. KCD 2 has life simulation features, and also everything you do often takes time to do it. You have to keep on top of your hunger, your sleep, your hygiene. These things affect your ability to interact with people effectively, whether people are willing to trade with you, your health and stamina, as well as their regeneration, which in turn affects your ability to explore the world and engage in combat. This in turn is made doubly harder when you factor in weapon and armor durability, which to repair you need to do manually at a grindstone or by visiting a blacksmith. But repairs for better armor cost a lot, so you'll need money, and to earn money you're gonna need to sell stuff, but your carry weight limit dictates how much you can have on you at one time, and so there are all these interconnected systems that you have to micromanage, tons of elements to consider, and that's without mentioning injuries stemming from combat or just doing dumb shit you probably shouldn't have done, or intoxication, food poisoning, blacksmithing, picking herbs, hunting, and alchemy. KCD 2 has a lot of elements to consider, elements that usually aren't in other games, points of intentional friction to make you think, to always have your brain switched on, and you can imagine that when a game like that gets popular, people are going to be frustrated that they have to worry about all of these things. KCD 2 would not be better without these things though. It would be lesser. The artistic vision would be compromised. KCD 2 marries its themes with its gameplay and world. This is what I mean when I say the sequel is taken above and beyond the original game. It's tough to get into this early in the video, but KCD 2 has a core theme of life and death, of the fragility of that life and how cherished it should be. By using systems that force the player to slow down, to consider every action they take, you build harmony between your themes and mechanics in a way that only video games can. You slowly begin to see the fragility of life too, how quickly you can lose that life, and of how much we take for granted, of how much it means to live and to love and to thrive, and the effort that it took to get us where we are today. KCD 2 celebrates humanity and life and perseverance, and that theme would be lesser without forcing the player to interact with life itself in major ways through story moments, but to me, more importantly, through the smaller things in its general mechanical loop. By taking time out to spend hours hunting or crafting the right potions that will come in handy later, by scouring the woods for just the right plants you can read about in the codex, or by giving death more weight by not allowing for infinite saves, you're making every move thoughtful. Nothing is incidental anymore, and the experience becomes visceral and real. It's why I think KCD is probably best played on hardcore, when one wrong move can completely fuck you over. While writing this, KCD 2 just dropped Hardcore Mode 2. Yeah, look, this is also a revision of a revision because this video took me so long. Hardcore has been out for ages now, so I might go back sometime and give it a go. I think it'd only really make the game stronger in my eyes. A better YouTuber with more time would do another playthrough before finishing the script to verify if that were the case, but I've been making this video for 12 months now, and I don't want to do that, and it's also not what the video's about anyway. One of the biggest criticisms Kingdom Come Deliverance has always had is the saving system, which, again, is worked into the life sim mechanics. You can only save if you sleep in a bed you own, stay at a bathhouse, my personal favourite activity, or drink Saviour Schnapps, a potion you can brew or buy, and it's something that I like to keep stocked up in my cupboards. The game also saves at major moments upon completing quests and when you save and exit the game. Don't get me wrong, I understand why people would be frustrated at this. I get why people would be frustrated at any of these features that cause friction. It's not that I don't understand or think they aren't frustrating, it's that I fundamentally disagree that frustration is a negative. It is okay to not engage with or appreciate art, but that doesn't mean your criticism is valid. Just because a game gives you friction doesn't automatically make it bad. Just because something might be frustrating also doesn't automatically make it bad. The criticism of the saving system and so much of KCD's gameplay seems to stem from the same place as criticism for the Souls games and their lack of an ability to pause, that it's just not convenient. And while that might be perfectly true, I don't think convenience should neuter artistic expression, nor should convenience be a determining factor in video game quality. Every new Assassin's Creed, there you go folks, I mentioned it, makes fast traveling far easier so you really never have to run around the world. And while that's more convenient than The Witcher 3's fast travel, I think basically everyone agrees navigation in The Witcher 3 is far and away superior. Convenience doesn't always win. I'm now going to do the video SAS thing of talking about Dark Souls. You can't pause in Dark Souls because it's part of a larger point those games are making, especially the first Dark Souls. Miyazaki had a very clear goal, to make a game that was constantly pushing back against you, a world that was endlessly hostile, an experience that was just frustrating enough that victory was ecstasy. People wrongly suggest that Dark Souls is unfair and skewed against you in a way that is infuriating, but that's not true. Dark Souls is carefully balanced in your favor if you understand how to interact with the game's mechanics and don't bash your head against a wall trying to brute force it. If you're clever, if you're engaged, Dark Souls ultimately wants you to win, but it also wants you to think. Not being able to pause keeps you on edge. Nowhere is ever safe unless you're resting at a bonfire or sitting in Firelink. You can never truly feel comfortable. The game wants to use the medium of video games to blur the lines between game and reality. If you could pause, there would be a safety net that would dispel the illusion and tension, and that's not something they wanted to compromise on for the sake of convenience because of their artistic vision. And I think that's respectable, not something to criticize. But that's also the thing. You can very easily get in places all the time in Dark Souls where you can go AFK and nothing will happen. The game isn't always throwing shit at you constantly. If you beat the enemies in an area, 9 times out of 10, you can get up and leave your controller and nothing will happen. The no pausing issue in Dark Souls is blown entirely out of proportion. It exists to create ongoing tension, but it's not so much friction that you can't reasonably go AFK for a bit if you need to. The same logic, though, applies to saving in Kingdom Come Deliverance. People really harp on about this saving system, about how it's so damn annoying, but isn't that purely because you're so used to constant autosaves? KCD2 is still more convenient to save than a PS2 game was. I don't think it's the fault of the game. You can craft Saviour Schnapps from the very start of the game very easily and be totally stocked up on them. You can also save and quit whenever you want. The saving system, like not being able to pause in Dark Souls, is used to create added tension, to build out the life sim systems, and to put more emphasis on the fragility of life. But it isn't so much friction that you can't save whenever you want. It's just one extra step to make it thoughtful enough that you have to think about it, and it adds a layer of depth and tension to your actions. The only real criticism I find is that if you can't save on the fly, the game needs to be so stable that it never crashes. And this was a very big issue in the first game. However, in the second, I never had a single crash in my over 130 hours, and I'm pretty sure that even if it does crash, it saves the game anyway. That might be wrong. I might be spreading misinformation. Don't quote me on that. I just pulled that off the top of my head. Maybe I heard that at some point. You know what? I should cut this. It's fine not to engage with art, but your lack of engagement with the art doesn't constitute valid criticism. These people who complain about games doing things differently, about any amount of friction being bad, just simply don't care about video games being an art form, merely a product for consumption, and that product has to be as smooth and efficient as possible. It's what happened to Ubisoft. What they make these days barely constitutes art. It's just a product designed to please as many people as possible, with as much frictionless gameplay as possible, with nothing to say using it. As much content as can be, with as little difficulty in completing the content as possible. It's gaming junk food, and it's becoming normalized. Games that step outside of the box, that dare to be a little cumbersome, a little thoughtful, that require you to consider what you're doing and how, are often chastised for it. I think Arthur taking time to do a little animation when you pick anything up is infinitely better than it just teleporting into your inventory, actually. It's insane to me that this is genuinely criticized by people. Criticism like this homogenizes games to the point that everything becomes the exact same. I think it's good when games are frustrating, when games are more than just simply fun for their entirety. That said, I have my issues with these systems, not on a conceptual level, but in execution in the opposite way. I think they're often far too easy to avoid. For example, eating becomes a non-issue. You can just buy 99 dried perch and you're set for a while. It stops it from actually being thoughtful, and it just becomes an extra step. The same for how easy it is to actually abuse the saving system. The potions are just too easy to acquire. I think KCD shines in its early game, when things are scarce and money is low, but it doesn't take long to turn that around, and when you do, the things that were once thoughtful become just a minor nuisance. It trivializes the systems that are supposed to deepen the experience, and that's a shame. I think food poisoning adds a layer, but dried food pretty much never spoils, and so I no longer have to worry about going off into the forest to hunt and then cook a hare and eat it within the allotted time, when I can buy hundreds of dried apples instead. I think possibly a way to remedy this would be to have Henry require different types of food, that if all you eat is dry apples, your nourishment is going to fall because you aren't eating a balanced diet, which would require you to make sure you eat all different types of food. Fruit, vegetables, carbs, and protein, just so you're maximizing that nourishment stat. I think dried foods could still be useful in a pinch, but you'd never be at your max health unless you make sure you're eating varied foods. I don't think this will become annoying either. I think it'd turn something from a minor annoyance into something, again, thoughtful, to use the right types of food at the right time to maximize stats and stay on top of your nourishment. And hey, if the third game wanted to add a cooking mechanic similar to blacksmithing and alchemy, where Henry can cook different meals from the period, that'd be really cool and would work into what I'm talking about. Maybe even give him a little rat to sit on his head too. I mean, if Sora can do it, Henry can. I do think this change would even push you into exploration, into maybe going apple picking if you added the ability to harvest fruit and vegetables from the world, as well as hunting for your own meat, which while you can do, is often not really incentivized when you could just buy shit. And why would you buy meat that goes bad fast when you can buy dried fruit to pop whenever you feel like it? I'm not sure how you'd go about ironing that out, but look, I'm just a guy. I'm trying my best here, the same as I'm sure Warhorse is. Trying their best, I mean, not just a guy, that'd be crazy. And don't get it twisted, there is plenty of incentive to explore this world, more than there ever was in KCD1, and that game had it in droves too. I've never felt quite so intoxicated, in a good way, by an open world before. That might be a crazy thing to say, but I honestly do think exploring, roaming around, talking to people in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is probably the best of any game like this I've ever played. The only rival I find is in Red Dead Redemption 2, and the reason I feel KCD 2 is superior isn't necessarily because of the quality of what you find or the people you bump into, but the level of interaction you have and how it affects Henry's progression and journey, and how all of that ties back around to a central point, to the themes the game is trying to explore. Don't get me wrong, Red Dead Redemption 2 does this as well, and I suppose if I'm being honest, I have a very hard time putting one above the other in this regard, so I won't. But KCD 2 is one of the very best. As you explore, you discover, which sounds basic, but so many games miss the mark here, especially ones made by, they rhyme with Schluby Ploff. The question mark system that has plagued many a AAA open world game is a blight that needs to be eradicated, except for in Horizon, which I will shill until the broadheads come home. Horizon deserves better. Don't leave a single comment. Go watch this video, and then leave a comment. I think it's still good. probably. Exploration in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is emergent. As you wander a field or a forest, you will simply come across things, and it happens all the time, and these things are so varied too. It can be simple stuff, like a bandit who tries to rob you, although there are different types of bandits, ones that are territorial and will ward you off, ones that are kind of like highwaymen who'll try and lure you in and then attack you, or sometimes ones that have placed traps and will assault you after you fall into it. And how you engage and deal with these situations is up to you. But that's just a few variations on one type of discoverable. There are so many more unique things to find, sometimes one-offs, and sometimes reoccurring characters with their own stories that resolve naturally in their own way through exploration. I can guarantee there are some I've probably never seen before, and these elements of the world do wonders to bring it to life, to make everything feel organic and random, despite being pre-calculated and scripted, the same way Red Dead Redemption 2 does. I think, to be fair, a lot of this game feels inspired by Red Dead Redemption 2, even down to the greet and antagonize feature, which, despite being kinda just copied over, I like it, man. I think it suits Kingdom Come Deliverance so damn well, mainly because this game handles reputation in a similar way. The way you interact with the people you meet and in the towns you discover alters the way the world responds to you. There is a direct consequence for all of your actions, and that again makes your actions thoughtful. The way you choose to engage matters, and that makes progression matter to a larger degree than it does in something like Skyrim, for example. All of Kingdom Come Deliverance's stats are tied to something tangible. Your reputation is swayed by your actions and the way you've treated people, but it's also tied to your clothes, hygiene, and intellect, and so you have to be clever about how you engage. If you've made a bad name for yourself, it might be clever to play into that. Wear armor and gear up, and then you can threaten and intimidate people to greater effect, and that shit will help you. But if you try the same shit in a town where you've been nothing but nice, it's not going to be as effective as if you wore a nice set of noble clothes and tried to use your intelligence and cunning to get your way. It gets deeper though when dealing with specific NPCs. Sometimes your specific skills will come into play. If you need to win over a blacksmith, for example, but you haven't leveled your blacksmithing skill, you're going to fail that speech check, which is very funny for Henry. Your father would be very unproud. In the same way that if you're trying to help someone who's wounded to get on the good side of a relative for a quest, if you've leveled your survival skills and alchemy, you'll be able to restore that ailing person to health and will have won over the favor of the person who needed your help, allowing you to progress in a quest more smoothly. And so you have to think about how to spend your time best. If you spend all your time flitting from quest to quest without engaging in the world, without talking to its people, and again, without truly living in this space, you're going to end up having a harder time. Part of what makes KCD work is that experience is everything, and that once again plays into the themes at the heart of the game, and something we'll discuss later, something that was already touched upon with Hans in the prologue. Henry's experience trumps Hans's nobility. KCD2 works to deconstruct a lot of the historical, societal structures that were in place, and Henry's place within that world, and the choices you make acts to transcend boundaries that historically were rarely broken free of. Perks play into this too. Perks are a part of games I often skim over in videos like this. If you went and watched the Horizon video, you probably thought to yourself, man, he just never talks about the skill tree. Or you didn't think that, in which case, now you know I'm a hack fraud. Actually, looking at the video, I did talk about the skill tree, and I was clearly remembering the bad script I originally wrote for that video that will never see the light of day. But in KCD2, the perks to me feel incredibly intentional. I find that in most games with a skill tree, I end up just grabbing all the perks possible in a random haphazard order because it just doesn't matter, and I think part of that comes from the fact games are usually too fucking easy. But because KCD is such a thoughtful experience, I found myself stopping to read the perks, and also because you can only get 1 or 2 perks at a time until you've progressed, and because perks are not universal but tied to specific skills that are leveled in different ways, there isn't crazy amounts of deliberation to the point that it becomes overwhelming. If you've leveled Thievery, you get a perk point to use in that skill set, and when you see how many skills you can get, it's maybe like 2 or 3 different ones to choose from at that point, and so you read them and you pick the one that feels most currently valuable, rather than reading from a whole list of different skills across different trees that are unlocked with one universal skill point, of which you sometimes accumulate tens at a time. I'm looking at you, Forbidden West, that shit was unreasonably stupid. It feels like a development on how the perk system works in something like Skyrim, but by making the earning of perks feel like something you've actively worked for, rather than something you just sort of accumulate in strange ways, like jumping a lot. I think this works because of how steep the leveling curve can be sometimes, but it's not really something that it makes sense to go out of your way to cheese. Like, sure, you can go and spend ages picking flowers to level herbalism, but that feels like a dumb way to play. KCD is most fun when you organically engage with the mechanics because they are in and of themselves rewarding, and you can level skills in more than one specific way, which means by just playing the game and involving yourself with the mechanics, you naturally level in ways that feel right, and in turn satisfying and rewarding. You feel like you're getting better at things the more you play with them, which while on paper is similar to Skyrim, the fact you level through multiple actions and the fact those actions are usually thoughtful tears KCD away from Skyrim to have depth in a way that Skyrim never did. The perks in KCD 2 are also actually useful and don't require mods to make them things that feel helpful and valuable. And the perks you decide to unlock in the skills you lean toward develops your own unique playstyle based on how you're approaching dealing with situations, which ties into the role-playing element of KCD 2, forging your build, as it were. There are 3 key ways worth highlighting that you engage with KCD. Obviously, there are a minutiae of ways in between these and aspects that can be combined to forge distinct styles of play, but most all you do will be made up of engaging with 3 key aspects that I think can be broken down for critique, separate from exploration, which we've pretty much already been over. Those being the umbrella systems of combat, stealth, and dialogue. I'm aware this kind of sounds like I'm simplifying the gameplay loop and the depth, but there's a lot more to talk about later, and I've been over some already. And I think each of these umbrella terms goes into more detail, just bear with me. Combat is an interesting topic because I find myself wanting to heavily criticize it, not for its conceptual aims of being realistic and challenging, which is what a lot of people criticize it for, but more so for, again, its execution of those ideas. But at the same time, because people seem to not understand what KCD is going for, I find myself more often than not defending it, and so in this video, where I can be more nuanced, I will do perhaps a bit of both, perhaps at the same time. KCD 2's combat functions around the same design philosophy as the first. It wants to capture authentic medieval combat. I'm aware medieval is a broad stretch of time and there are multiple countries with medieval periods, but it was just my shorthand for saying combat from Bohemia and other parts of Europe during the latter part of the medieval period, because that is a cumbersome sentence that I've gone and said anyway, so fuck. KCD achieves this, I think, to great effect. I saw a tweet, no, it was a skeet. I'm not calling it that, that's why people hate us. It was a post on Blue Sky, follow me by the way, I no longer really use Twitter, from Chris Raygun. No shade to Chris, I really like him, and he commented on my Halo video once. I also think the post was a genuine question. I'm just using it as an example of sentiments that a lot of people have. KCD, and by extension KCD 2, actually is kind of supposed to have bad combat. It's supposed to feel clunky and cumbersome and frustrating, especially when you haven't leveled any of your skills, because it wants to emulate as much as it can the real experience of fighting in this period. One-on-one fights with swords and armor often lasted a while because armor was tough. You weren't chopping off limbs and cutting throats. You were clanking on each other's heads and body until one of you passed out and or died. Because it's not an action game, you're really meant to avoid combat because it's dangerous, clunky, and monotonous. It's part of the game's slight immersive sim nature of trying to focus on realism. You're usually rewarded for being clever above all. I will say though, KCD 1 does this better than KCD 2. I think combat is one of the areas that KCD 2 feels compromised. Don't get me wrong, I think it improves in areas. I think the camera was a huge issue in KCD 1, and while it certainly made it more clunky, I don't think it was intentional clunk. The targeting was too sticky and it created frustration from bullshit rather than intentionality. I also think KCD 1 was harder. Sure, once you had the Master Strike and good armor, you could very well take on larger groups, but it took a while to really get to that point, at least for me, and it felt that even towards the end of the game, I could get ganked and fucked over. Combat really did always remain hard. In KCD 2 though, this shit is far too easy. They improved the Master Strike to give it more intentionality. Now instead of a perfect block auto Master Striking, you have to strike from the opposite angle your opponent strikes from, and this improves it. It makes it less of a press one button to win mechanic, but I think after 100 hours of play, you start to realize that making Master Strike better doesn't matter when the combat in every other area is so easy. I think despite the general design of the game not wavering from KCD 1's philosophy, it feels odd to play when combat has become so trivial. From the midpoint of the game, I found I could take on hordes of guys with pretty much no problem, and that is a problem balancing. I thought traveling to Kuttenberg would be a reset, that I'd sort of max-leveled Trosky and the new area will be far harder and you sort of start from square one again in a way, and while to an extent that rings true, it's not hard enough to matter. The Master Strike still dominates, and despite the game rewarding you for being clever, you are never forced to be clever, because killing guys is so damn easy from the midpoint onwards. KCD 1 has superior balancing from start to finish. It suffered also from endgame issues, but the curve was steadier. KCD2 is a stark difference where it gets too easy too early and harms the overall experience. It feels like Trosky was very much the difficulty curve of KCD1, and by the time you finish Trosky, it's kinda like endgame KCD1. But then you still have half a game to go where you are severely overpowered. And so I find it hard to assess whether the combat is superior to the first or not. I'd like to say it is, on a mechanical level, far and away better, but when KCD1 creates a stronger experience with its combat, it's hard for that to truly matter. AI reactions are better, their way of adapting on the fly is better, the animations are cleaner, and the human aspect is enhanced. You feel like you're fighting real people, and whether it's a bandit or a knight is distinct and noticeable. The Master Strike, like I said, is more thoughtful, and perks have been rebalanced to make it less of a one-note system. There's more experimentation with your combos and dodges, the game's systems are mechanically deeper, there's more to sink your teeth into. The game also shines in group battles and skirmishes because the mechanics themselves are stronger. But again, the actual experience, moment to moment, ends up lesser. And while the parts may be stronger, the sum is not, and that's a shame. It's not something that I felt killed KCD2, obviously. I'm speaking very, very highly of it, and the combat itself is still fun to engage in. It's not boring to fight people, but the experience as a whole feels lesser because of how it's balanced. Maybe this is something hardcore mode fixes, but it shouldn't have to. Where I think things have been refined in a big way though is through stealth. Stealth, crime, and its consequences have been turned from a thing you can exploit into a thing that is beneficial, but a major risk, increasing thoughtfulness. Stealth is now something that feels incredibly viable as a way to play a lot of the game. Part of that is due to the context after the halfway point, also when Henry's outlook begins to change, but beyond that, on a purely mechanical level, the way you're able to engage with stealthing, lockpicking, and stealth killing follows in the footsteps of the first game, yet is greatly expanded, especially with how it works into quest design. There are multiple times that sneaking around could net you additional information, in the form of items you needed to acquire or information to gather, and that was always up to you to figure out, especially with the introduction of a Thieves Guild type group. You can now feel directly incentivized to play this way. The best way this system is improved upon though is in risk factor. In KCD1 it was possible, like most stealth games, to be seen in stealth and then leave the line of sight, do the crime and get away with it anyway. So long as you aren't seen doing the crime, you won't be caught. In KCD2 that's now no longer the case. You could be seen doing something shady and then hours later steal something, and the NPCs will put 2 and 2 together and you'll end up confronted by the city guards. It's something so damn simple, but not only does it add more realism to the world, it alters how you think about stealth. You need to consider NPC routines and schedules, you need to worry about whether or not you were seen a few hours ago, which means in turn you'll be more likely to use potions in order to increase thievery skills to pull things off without a hitch, which means you're engaging with systems you wouldn't have bothered with in KCD1. This means the systems can't be exploited anymore. I found stealth was such a wonderful risk-reward in this game, and multiple times I found myself with a bounty on my head while in major locations because I fucked up and was caught snooping around before I assassinated someone, and they worked out that it must have been me. With this sort of crime and punishment system, where you can end up in jail, in the stocks, branded, or sometimes even hanged for your crimes, it adds greater depth to all of the stealth options because the consequences are so strict and so high. The issue though, yeah, look, sorry, there's always an issue, is that it's easy to avoid. If you were caught, which I was, I killed like 5 guys after being noticed in stealth and ended up with a huge bounty, and despite not being able to talk my way out of it, I simply told the guards to fuck off and then ran out of the city on my horse and into the country nice and far away, and then just slept for 2 weeks until my bounty was gone, which is exploitative. So while you can't exploit stealth, you can exploit the consequences, which does break the risk factor. I genuinely think bounties shouldn't ever run out, or at least it should take so long that it's not viable to rest to avoid them, because otherwise they aren't real consequences when they can be circumvented so damn fast. I also found toward the end of the game I was able to talk my way out of everything I did, and that broke immersion too, because I could kill a bunch of guys in broad daylight, say, "Oh, do you even know who the fuck I am?" and the guards would let me be. Look, I'm sorry, but that kind of sucks that you can do that. I really don't like it as much as it's very funny and gets you lots of karma on Reddit to make jokes about it. No, hey, I find the jokes funny too. On a critical level though, it's cooked, man. There is another element of stealth and thievery to discuss, but I want to save that for when we're in Kuttenberg and we discuss the late game economy. I think anyone who's deep in the trenches of KCD probably knows what I'm getting at here, but we'll save it for later. Dialogue outside of the way you can exploit the consequences of serial murder though is generally one of the strongest parts of Kingdom Come Deliverance as a franchise, and even more so in the sequel. I adore dialogue in this game, and it's one of my all-time favorite RPGs for how you engage with it. The interesting part about Kingdom Come Deliverance is that Henry is a predetermined character. We're stepping into his shoes, not our own guy, so how the fuck do they manage dialogue? Because playing as a preset character, yet being able to make wildly different moral choices feels like it's at odds with each other, right? I mean, I talked about this at length in my video on Odyssey, which I recently did a little retrospective on for Patreon, so feel free to check that out too. It was fun to see how my thoughts have changed. Sorry for plugging my shit all the time. Well, this is how they do it, and I think it's incredibly clever. Henry is a social chameleon, which was something that patron Zedda mentioned on my video about KCD2 that I posted on Patreon back when I was like 40 hours in, and this totally made it click in my brain in a way that I'd never considered before. So I'm sorry for stealing your thunder here, Zedda. I hope you don't mind. You're not getting any royalties, and you're still paying me, but I guess that's what the producer tier is for, right? You're helping me produce this stuff. So yeah, look, I actually am just gonna steal your thunder. Henry tries his best to blend in. That's how he survives. Henry is role-playing. We are Henry. There is a synergy between what we choose to do and what Henry would choose to do. Different from choice being a skill check, although there are moral ramifications, choice is trying your best to blend in, trying your best to do what you need to do to complete your quest or mission or task, which is core to the setting, a period which was all about perception, status, and social hierarchy. Henry has preset traits, and those traits come out when he's with his friends or in a major story moment, but when he's talking to strangers or royalty or really anyone, you can see him change to suit the role that will get him what he needs. If he has to pretend to be a nobleman, he will. Same with a knight, or a thief, or just a common man. Henry blends in to achieve his goals, and the game blends between this chameleon nature and his true nature really well in a way that never creates dissonance, and that's genuinely fucking brilliant. The only thing I would say is that I'd maybe appreciate if Henry has to, at a point, reckon with this, to come face to face with the fact that he's the fakest motherfucker around, that he often is just lying to get what he wants. I'm not sure if KCD3 will tackle that. I mean, we know it'll tackle the moral consequences of it, but will it tackle the idea that he's a manipulative little freak? I don't know, but it'd be an interesting thing to do because of how well choice and player input is tied into his character and context within the setting. And that's the thing. Like I talked about earlier, dialogue is central to KCD, and the way dialogue works is through reputation, hygiene, clothing, and your own skill set, and using all of those to your advantage in quests can often feel like an immersive sim. Very, very often, I'd find myself thinking, I wonder if this works. And 9 times out of 10, it worked. Whether it was to gather information through a new skill I knew I had, or to go out of my way to tell someone something I hadn't been prompted to do, the game allows for major experimentation, and that is facilitated mainly by dialogue, and sometimes the avoidance of it, and what you choose to say and who you choose to speak to, and a lot of the best things you can do aren't even marked. You just have to be clever with it. The quests in this game are so much more open-ended than the first game, in a way that rewards, once again, thoughtfulness. That's my new buzzword that everyone on the Discord will make fun of me for the next 6 months. You just wait, I'm going to squeeze at least one diegetic into this video. I have a bit more to say with regards to dialogue too, especially with regards to specific quests and instances, but we'll touch upon those as we go. The dialogue itself, in terms of quality, like I said before, is, for a majority of the time, really good, and the voice acting is tenfold that of the first game, which had some questionable voice acting choices.
Door order by burning and pillaging the king's estates.
Greetings, Sir Markvard. The efforts of the king's brother to bring order to this chaotic land are undoubtedly noble.
I think a system with good dialogue, choice, and player agency is helped a great deal by dialogue that feels realistic and subtly written. KCD is dripping in subtext, and a lot of the time it's up to you to read into what people are saying rather than taking their words at face value. Sometimes people are lying to you, sometimes they're withholding information, and your ability to deduce is a core part of how you respond and what you do with information, and I love that. Not only does dialogue have mechanical complexity, it has narrative complexity, and I just don't know how they kept up this level of quality for a game with so much fucking talking. Like, holy shit, man, this is some insane black magic, maybe. And I suppose that gets us onto how this region itself ties itself back into the main quest. What is the purpose of the exploration, of all the stuff you can do, of the side stories, and of the people you meet? Because there is a reason. And it's by the time you get yourself into Lord Semin's wedding that it all finally comes together. But I think we need to set the scene a little bit. Henry's goal to talk to von Bergov manifests as getting into Lord Semin's wedding, where von Bergov is said to be in attendance. To do so, you can choose two approaches, getting a job for the blacksmith Radovan or the miller Krazel. I did the former purely because, Henry was always a blacksmith's son and Martin kind of felt quite core to this game and I just wanted to try out the new blacksmith mechanics ASAP. However, the miller would also make sense given where Henry lived for most of KCD1 and the lessons taught to him by Peshek. Once the apprentice of Radovan, you are tasked with a bunch of quests, stuff that takes you all across the Trosky map that will in turn, hopefully if you're playing the game right, introduce you to so many different side stories and characters. Differently from KCD1, here you meet the people of this kingdom before you meet its rulers. This is a very important distinction to make. In KCD1, we find ourselves in the service of Sir Radzig and allied with Hanush and Divish. These are people we meet very early on. We see them as good leaders who cared for us, who took us in and allowed us into their service. They get Henry back on his feet, and so for the game, we're sort of riding on that high. We see ourselves as capable and independent, but also somewhat above the regular people who don't really understand our plight or what we're on a mission to do. Not to the point that Henry ever gets full of himself, but I do think as the player we're supposed to feel like we're rising above our station, and thereby above the people of the world. We always know better than them. Henry buys into nobility meaning something, and the gameplay facilitates that. You feel as though you're rising ranks and social standing more than morphing dependent on the situation. Here though, we explore this land before we ever lay eyes on von Bergov. The picture we get of Trosky and of its people is first-hand. We meet beggars and knights and guards and innkeepers, blacksmiths, alchemists, nomads, lords, and everything in between. We get such a vast and nuanced picture of Trosky in a way I don't think the Sasau region ever afforded us, because of Henry's tunnel vision and blind loyalty to Radzig and Hanush, which was the point, don't get me wrong, that's not a flaw of KCD1, but KCD2 is already deconstructing that in such a subtle way. Most every quest in Trosky feels as though it contributes to a larger whole. I can't go through every single side quest here because that would be fucking insane. Technically I could do it, but that would be really tedious. But I'll throw a few examples your way. Bad Blood is a quest that comes upon returning to Bozhena, the herb woman who nursed you back to health, who you can also pay back, by the way. That wasn't just empty words from Henry. Her daughter Pavlena went into town to sell baskets and hasn't returned. I'll make a long story short. After doing some investigative work, we worked to discover she sort of fell in love with a boy from town, and because she was an outcast after her mother and her were driven out of town, some of the townsfolk didn't really like that. They followed her and her boyfriend into the woods, and one thing led to another, and her boyfriend died, and she was captured because they didn't want to get caught and didn't know what else to do. Once we gather the info, we can go and find Pavlena and disarm the situation to save her. Obviously, she can also die here. You can also even simply use a bow and kill him at range without even talking to him, which is really fucking cool.
Hold on, wait. I gotta try something.
Stop struggling, you bitch!
Yeah, buddy! That was actually awesome.
Clapping.
Once we return her to her mother, we discover why they were kicked out of town. The story she tells us is that she was a midwife for Yakesh, a farmer from Troskowitz. The birth of one of his children started sooner than it should have, and Yakesh never sent for Bozhena, thinking because his wife had already given birth 3 times before, a 4th would be no issue, and the child didn't make it, despite Bozhena trying everything she could. Yakesh blamed Bozhena and Pavlena, and the whole village believed him and drove them out of town. Because of Yakesh's disdain, they kidnapped Pavlena and her boyfriend died. Bozhena asks, quite understandably, that we kill Yakesh so this can end. However, if we go and speak to Yakesh, we get more of the story, and it's not as simple as a twist. It's not that Bozhena was lying, it's that there's much more complexity and nuance to this situation. Yakesh didn't send for Bozhena because prior births had gone smoothly before the midwife could even arrive. He almost felt that it was pointless. It wasn't hubris. Once they did arrive, he saw the medicine and poultices as black magic, something dark, and given the period, can you blame him? He was frustrated, confused, and blamed Bozhena because why else would this have happened to him? It doesn't make it correct, and that's why you can reason with him to put things right, but it gives context to his actions. He explains that he didn't blame Pavlena, and his drunken rantings about his trauma in the tavern was never meant to spur on these actions from the other villagers. He's just broken and obviously depressed. Both Bozhena and Yakesh are simply people, nuanced and complex, and both of their feelings and actions make sense, and as Henry, we get to explore that, and the best outcome of the quest is not to kill Yakesh out of revenge, but to make amends, to do what's best for Pavlena and to try to move forward. In the quest Invaders, it starts as a task to help innkeeper Betty. There are humans, the main enemy faction in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, at her tavern, and despite the general disdain for them, she needs the money and they aren't causing any problems. After serving them, someone gets a bit mouthy and wants to fight them. You can either join in or try and dispel the argument. Whichever you choose, they'll appear later at the Nomad Camp. At the Nomad Camp, you can talk to them in an attempt to make sure they don't return, just so trouble isn't caused and nobody has to die, as Wojtek is very adamant that he's going to kill them if they ever show up. In reality, they'd obviously kill him. In trying to get them to leave, you can sit with them for a drink, get to know them, and have a laugh. They're just regular guys. Despite the language barrier, Henry gets on with them and opens up about his own past, and so do they, about love and loss and friendships. But also, you discover that these humans were with Mark Vart von Aulitz that day in Skalitz. They were part of the army that torched your village and ultimately killed your parents. They didn't do it, but they were on that side of the battle. It'd be easy to just pull out your sword now and kill them here, get revenge the way that Henry wants, but I think it's obvious to anyone with basic media literacy. The game doesn't want you to do that. The purpose of this quest is allowing you to understand the nuance of your enemy, the regrets they feel and the guilt they harbour, but also that war is not personal. When it becomes personal, it becomes messy. But the reality is that war can never not be personal, when lives are on the line. This is the first major inkling of Henry's real allegiance, to himself and his morals above all. He wants revenge on those responsible for ordering the attack, not every single soldier allied with Sigismund. The conversation you have with the dog while drunk kind of hammers this home, if it is a little on the nose.
Be careful not to let your anger consume you. Your destination is right in front of you. But be careful.
I will. Don't worry.
Kuvest as Orodat.
In a different quest, The Hermit, you end up discovering the Knights of the Red Cross. Templars. Yeah, I know, fuck off. Are plotting to destabilize the kingdom. We discover Conrad, living in the woods, is being hunted for discovering this, as was his close friend Ambrose, who was the original hermit. In the context of history, the Templars are on the side of Wenceslas. They are actively trying to undermine King Sigismund and his allies, but in this quest, the obvious outcome and the best moral choice is to help Conrad. He's honest, vulnerable, and principled, while the Templars feel secretive, shady, and manipulative, using their faith as a mask for control and dominance. Conrad represents progress over blind loyalty. Siding with Conrad feels like the most moral and human option, despite it being against the interests of your liege lord. There are so many other examples of this, getting to know the nomads and helping their family, understanding their culture and the discrimination they face, getting to know Vostatek and the huntsman and the relationship he has with his family, and the drinking problem that's pushed a wedge between him and his son, the jaunt where you end up torn between helping Semin and Gnarly, two noblemen with good intent, over a few thieves who were caught up with the wrong people. I could keep on going, but it's very, very clear through these quests the game is pushing nuance above all. It often presents you with a clear-cut story and objective only to throw a spanner in the works as you learn more information. That what you thought you knew and the narrative spun by the person with personal stakes is not quite true. That actually most situations are morally grey, nothing is black and white, and it's your job to figure that out, to see through the noise and to try and discover the most amicable solution. And that's not always totally possible, but it's always worth it to try. Of course, this structure of narrative makes for an utterly riveting RPG experience because nothing is simply straightforward and you have to talk to people to unravel things, but on a thematic level, the game is pushing on you how all of the people of this kingdom have depth. They're all so many different shades of grey, and the more quests you play, the more apparent that becomes, and the more bizarre it feels for Henry's driving force to be revenge against the evil man who killed his family for his heroic liege lord in the name of the noble King Wenceslas. At first, I thought the game was trying to make a point about personal revenge and about Henry coming to terms with that, about Henry having to discover that his personal quest only brings more pain, and it was using the side quests to do that, which is an interesting character journey, and it's part of the game, but it's actually far deeper than that, and it all comes to a head after the wedding itself. The wedding is a pretty wonderful combination of your experience so far. Almost every character you've met is here, and you've actually formed bonds with them. They know you and you know them. It's not superficial or a quick fake bond formed out of necessity for a plot point. The game has taken its time to make sure you give a shit about these people and this kingdom. Trosky kind of feels like home now, and this wedding is a really nice culmination of that. Although I lost all my fucking footage, so I had to replay it and I didn't have the right save, so from this section on you're seeing someone else's save. Oh, hi Hi Tuma. Thanks to Silent One Sarah for uploading this. I did not want to have to replay the game for footage. You saved my life. So anyway, the wedding works as a wonderful culmination to tie everything you've done together. However, this is how the game gets you, how it flips everything on its head. Von Bergov never shows up. The groom takes off moments after his vows, leaving the bride alone. Henry stumbles upon her and tries to make her feel better. However, they're then stumbled upon by someone else who takes their private conversation as disrespect to the groom, that Henry is making advances, and that springs into a fight. It's a total misunderstanding, but it lands Henry in jail, along with Hans, who was also at the wedding. Unlike Henry, though, Hans broke the law. Okay, I say unlike Henry, but I did do a lot of pretty fucking heinous shit. Let's just say unlike Henry, Hans got caught breaking the law. He was poaching, and while that would be handled differently given his nobility, they have no fucking idea who he is, and is sentenced to be hanged, while we're released to work off our sentence, setting up the next set-piece quest. This sequence does things on so many fronts. I mean, mechanically, it's a successor in many ways to the monastery quest, giving you an open sandbox from which to figure out what to do, a whole host of NPCs to interact with, from which to gain information or access. It's slightly easier. Okay, it's a lot easier, but I think the design philosophy is much the same, and as a certified monastery enjoyer, I appreciate that. It also works as a way to get us used to the layout of the castle prior to a quest coming up in maybe 3 to 4 hours time, which has us revisit the location under greater pressure. However, on a thematic level, I think this sequence is rather astounding. Tonally, and in terms of our perspective, it's very different from how we felt within the castle walls in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. It was usually a place of safety, security, and trust. If you went inside a castle in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, you could kind of relax a bit, let your guard down. That's home, a safe point, similar to bonfires in Dark Souls or save rooms in Resident Evil. Here though, it feels like a prison. I mean, it is your prison. You're trapped inside these walls, and in the distance you can see the freedom that you'd had for the entire game prior, the region you came to know so well, and that freedom has been snuffed out. This castle is a symbol of oppression. And yes, castles do actually represent things. The assassins seek freedom and say they work for the people, yet they live in a larger-than-life fortress from which they wage war, essentially.
Brother, what the fuck are you talking about? Castles don't represent anything. They aren't diametrically opposed.
It's suffocating, and part of that comes from being forced in here. You don't get to ride here yourself, walk through the gates and have a sniff around. You're brought here off-screen and thrown in jail. Your first time walking this area is as a prisoner, and it's foreign. You don't know any of these people. You don't know the layout. You feel so at odds and so out of your depth, and that feeling all comes down to how the game has worked up until this point. All the characters you came to know are somewhere else. This is all totally new, and you're starting from scratch without freedom and with a time limit. 12 bell chimes and Hans is hanged, so you'd better get to work. I would sit here and discuss the mechanical intricacies of the sequence, but like, do you really want me to do that? Okay, intuition says that you do, but I really don't think it would be particularly enlightening. All I have to say is that it's deep, it has a bunch of options, and it's sort of the culmination of all the mechanics thus far. Understanding people, learning information, gaining access, and having to figure shit out one step at a time. Once you finally figure out how best to reach the chapel at the top of the castle, you can speak to Captain Thomas, one of the blokes who you met by the pond, who I didn't mention, but I'm mentioning now, meaning he's the only one who can truly vouch for us, that we are who we say we are. Just before Hans is about to be hanged in front of a public crowd, Henry comes down with Thomas to proclaim Hans's innocence. Well, not his innocence, because he did in fact poach, but that he is in fact the Lord of Perkstein and so is allowed to break the law, and Ulrich still wants to hang him. He refuses to believe Thomas, sends them both away and proceeds with the hanging, playing to the crowd and into his own power fantasy. This entire sequence shows us how people are treated when they are not afforded the luxuries of nobility. In KCD1, we were always bailed out by RETROSPECTIVE or Hanush or Divish, given free reign to kinda do what we wanted, excused if we did anything too bad, all in the name of their quest to restore Wenceslas. But here, we aren't friends with any of these people. We may have come to admire the region and its people, but it counts for nothing when on the wrong side of the upper class. We get to see how regular people are treated, and it feels unfair. It's tyrannical. The guards and the chamberlain have gone mad with power. Thankfully then, the good lord of the castle, Otto von Bergov, returns just in time to save the day. Once again, true nobility prevails, and Hans and Henry are safe from harm. For now. we'll put a pin in this. I hope you forgive me for doing lots of story recap here. I feel like I'm regurgitating plot to you a little, and I try my best to avoid that, but sometimes there's nothing for it. You kind of have to delve into the events as they unfold so that you can give all the proper context to break it down. I know a lot of people watching this probably have played the game too, but jumping right into the analysis can feel a little messy. Trust me when I say recapping relevant events is for a reason, and hopefully by the end it'll be satisfactory. I'll try and keep it as concise as possible. Again, this might be me being way too self-conscious about what I'm writing. I hate the idea of waffling in these things when they're already so long, and yeah, I know I'm waffling now, aren't I? Let's just move on. Actually, while I have you, I wonder how much calls to action in videos actually matter. Like, every YouTuber under the sun says, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I never do that, so like, would you consider liking and subscribing? I'd be interested to see if just straight up asking you actually affects that, but also, like, don't like and subscribe if you don't want to, because, I mean, who am I? You don't owe me shit. Henry and Hans, after being compensated by von Bergov, are essentially tasked by von Bergov with heading to Nabokov to negotiate with Sir Jaromir Nebak, seeking his alliance in von Bergov's efforts to combat the bandit threat in the region. And if we want to win his favor for Hanush, then I guess we better help him out. I mean, we have a score to settle with those bandits too. While here, you can wander around, get to know people, and there's even a romance option, which I did. However, as you speak to people and wander around, you get this increasing sense of something being wrong. It's not so obvious to the point it becomes dumb, but it's there, lingering in the air. From the moment you arrive, there are too many horses. The guards don't speak like guards that you've come to know. The people seem a little on edge. It just doesn't feel right. So, you can choose to do a little snooping. You don't have to, though, and I almost didn't. I thought maybe I was overthinking it and it was just like a bit poorly written or something, and you can leave with no information, but the game is nudging you ever so slightly to explore and work it out. I also killed a lot of people that I regret with added context, I can't lie. I hope their families don't miss them too much. If you pickpocket the key to the cellar after like 18 fucking tries and make your way in, you can stumble upon the real Jaromir. His fortress has been taken over by the bandits who attacked you at the river. Once Hans is done talking to fake Jaromir, you can reconvene, explain the situation, and get the fuck back to Trosky Castle to tell von Bergov. They captured one of the bandits who ambushed von Bergov, and you can head down to the dungeon to get information. It's up to you how heavy you want to go, full-on torture or a calmer approach. I think the game is once again trying to test how nuanced your brain is, whether you just want to go full video game mode and get all the info as fast as you can, or whether you're able to come at situations presented with complexity. As any good RPG should, nuance is key to any game with choice. I should want to think carefully about my actions. You can also tell von Bergov here about the things you learned while he was gone, from your travels and exploration, something that will help with the search for bandits and what they want. Again, this is complex, because while you of course want to find the bandits, you also don't want to turn on the people of the world who you like and trust and understand in a way von Bergov probably never could. Getting these people mixed up in these affairs doesn't feel right, and that comes from getting to know them before their lords. A shift in perspective that alters how you play, but this shift is child's play compared to what's to come. I did also accidentally hear Dobbin Comrade, which I regret. I really didn't mean to press that, so now riders are heading to find him to question him, and I'm worried for his life. I didn't mean to do this. Questioning the prisoner, we learn a little about his band, although not a lot, and nothing major that's worth mentioning here, although we do discover why older Semyon left his wedding early, and you can overhear little puzzle pieces of this during the wedding if you're paying attention, although it doesn't properly come together until now. He was an informant for these bandits, a traitor to von Bergov. You can choose whether or not to snitch too, and it never feels right to. Similar to the situation with Conrad, Henry would have been on the side of the Crusaders for Wenceslas. We are not fans of these bandits, but it feels wrong to turn in someone we have respect for, even if only a little bit. We also learn that with the bandits is Istvan Tarth, one of the central antagonists of the game, and the man who Henry blames for a lot of his torment. Istvan is in league with Sigismund, and knew the attack on Skalitz was coming, yet didn't warn RETROSPECTIVE. This betrayal caused the death of Henry's parents. He was forced to let him go at the end of KCD1, but now searches for him to get revenge and claim his father's sword, a symbol of what he feels is his family honor. So, the plan is set. The army will ride in the morning to Nabokov to take back the fortress, free Jaromir, and slay the bandits. But before that, we have a night of merriment. I always enjoy how Kingdom Come Deliverance deals with moments like this. I think the immersion of the game really lifts up the social events, the same as the wedding. Here, though, we finally get to know the people of the castle, the chamberlain, some nobles, and Bartosz, the personal bodyguard of von Bergov. Just like the people of Trosky, everyone here is nuanced and complex and makes you care. The game really takes its time to make sure you're invested, and it writes these characters in a way that makes them believable. And I've explained all of this to you, the side quests and the build-up, because it's core to what the game does next. As we approach Nabokov, it becomes clear this isn't going to be the clean operation Chamberlain Ulrich seems to think. The entire place was ready for us, and before we can even set eyes on the fortress, we're ambushed. The Chamberlain is killed, chaos erupts, blades clash, people scream, and the game throws you into one of its most intense set pieces yet. Scrambling to catch up with Hans in the midst of this skirmish, we come upon the leader of the bandits. Henry stands to defend Hans, and they engage in somewhat of a war of perspectives. This is our introduction to Jan Žižka. Henry holding fast that honor is important and sneaking up on people and tricking them is dishonorable, which is a bit dissonant given how we've played. I probably stab more people in the back than the front, but I don't see this as a real criticism, mainly because I believe Henry doesn't even equate his shady actions with Žižka's. I think the dissonance actually runs deep in his own perspective, it's not an oversight. Žižka contests, though, that it works, and war is messy, and whatever advantage you can get makes all the difference, although he respects Henry's conviction and offers him a fair duel. This duel is pretty symbolic. This is Henry fighting against a way of war he finds particularly repugnant, and despite being ignorant to the truth of war, he takes a stance here anyway, against Žižka, in the name of honor. Henry still believes his side is righteous, and Žižka's is not, and as the player, after KCD1 and what we've played here, we're with him. Because why wouldn't we be? But even if you win, you don't win. Henry takes his eye, another piece of symbolism, an eye for an eye and all that, and then you're overwhelmed, captured, and dragged into the fortress you came to liberate. Now a prisoner, once again. But then, we cut away, and no longer are we following Henry. We're with a familiar face. Yeah, it's Father Godwin. This sequence opens on a monologue from him.
The best laid plans of men don't always come to fruition. As the saying goes, man proposes, but God disposes. And then boots you right in the balls.
It's an irreverent perspective on fate. In a world dominated by Christianity, it's funny coming from a priest, but he knows all too well the unpredictable, often brutal nature of the world around them given his role in both war and society. This moment offers a clearer perspective on the conflict, where even the best laid plans are upended by forces beyond control, and those forces, whether divine or just dumb luck, don't always play fair, and things don't always go to plan. And in this unfiltered, third-person view, we start seeing the conflict for what it really is. Messy and full of morally ambiguous decisions. Where Henry strives to give purpose to every action, to apply reason or logic or morality, Godwin does the complete opposite. But not in a hand-wavy, he works in mysterious ways kind of way. Instead, it's like he grasps the true nuance of the human experience, that sometimes shit just fucking happens. Dwelling on any of it is futile and exhausting. All you can ever hope to do is your best, and to follow your heart. I've seen a lot of criticism for these sequences online, but to me, the Godwin sequence is such a smart move because it's a total shift in how we see the world as the player. Up to now, we've been so locked into Henry's perspective, into his rage, his grief, his neither what he thinks is justice, that the war has always felt kind of personal and narrow and incredibly black and white. Sigismund is bad, Wenceslas is good, anyone allied with them is the same. But stepping into Godwin's shoes lets us breathe for a second, to see things as someone who knows both battle and peace and understands both the difference and similarities, and from that perspective, everything gains clarity. The good versus evil perspective we felt for so long evaporates. It's so much more complicated. We even get a glimpse of Eric, Istvan's lover, a character who, from Henry's perspective, might as well just be another soldier to kill. But through Godwin's eyes, he's just a guy. He's decent, he's a little bit funny, he's got a charisma about him, and that reframes a lot. If this is who Istvan loves, maybe Istvan isn't the mustache-twirling villain Henry paints him as. He's certainly mustache-twirling, he'll never beat those allegations, but maybe none of this is as simple as we've made it out to be, and I think having us play as Godwin is important, because it creates dramatic irony. We, as the audience, can disconnect from Henry's journey for a minute, and when we return to him, we start to see it all in such a different way. We saw in an earlier scene that Godwyn has been sent by Hanush and RETROSPECTIVE to find us, Henry and Hans, and that's exactly what he does, marching right into enemy territory with a fire and determination that was never really present in KCD1. And so, I think it's worth addressing here Godwyn's voice. They changed his actor. Well, apparently, according to some people on Reddit, they didn't. It's the same guy, just doing a totally different voice, but it's not. KCD1 was Randall Scott Williams, KCD2 is Ewan McNaughton. Granted, it's far easier for me to verify this post-game release than these guys were pre-release, so no shade, I can't deal with another subreddit hating me, although they just might after this next segment. Regardless though, in KCD1 he sounded like this.
If I broke that vow, the consequences would be much worse than if I didn't.
And in KCD2, he sounds like, well, I've already played his voice, but to jog your memory...
Godwyn, I'm a priest and I'm looking for my friends. Or their bodies.
And yeah, look, he sounds very different. In KCD1, he was part of a funny little quest where you get drunk and then you have to get up and help him do a sermon the next day, and it's really funny, it's memorable and became a big community meme like so many things did in KCD1. I get why they chose Godwyn to be the character to serve this outside perspective role, partly because he was the only other character you really meet in the whole game that felt like he had self-awareness, that he understood how ridiculous the world was that he existed in, and broke free of that mold, just like Henry. But I think anyone with ears can admit, his voice work was... listen, if you are a frequent user of r/Kingdom Come, I'm going to ask you to actually cover your ears for this next bit. His voice work sucked. Look, it worked in KCD1, especially given he was a funny character in a funny quest, but it was one of the more egregious voices in Kingdom Come Deliverance, and funny memes do not make it less bad. I think having Godwyn play such a vital role with his KCD1 voice would have only made it near impossible to connect with. I don't think it's actually even that different. The writing feels like Godwyn, the cadence feels like Godwyn, and those things are far more important than having the exact same voice. For Godwyn to have this big of a role, it had to be done, especially given the following scene.
Rebellion! They're attacking!
I came here to get them, and that's what I'm gonna do.
Looks like you know how to use a blade.
Fighting Turks will teach you that.
Hungary?
Kosovo.
I love this shit, man. It's so good. Žižka and Godwyn have something in common, and for now, they are allied. Cutting back to Henry, we meet him in his cell with Hans, and before we can get used to our new home, in comes István, who promptly is thrown in the cell beside us. Henry's honor must have counted for something, because Žižka believed his words about István, but it's strange that learning István is one of Sigismund's lackeys was so important to Žižka. And this is where the game plays its second Master Stroke. Or Master Strike! Ah, fuck, why didn't I write Master Strike? I actually did. That joke was in the script. Sorry, just a little peek behind the curtain there. Eric arrives. He frees István. There's fighting outside, and the man gets away again. It's infuriating. Godwyn arrives, he saves Hans and Henry, and we finally feel safe. For the first time in hours of playtime, we feel good again. And it doesn't end there. We don't stew in Henry's rage and lust for revenge. Instead, the game complicates things further. Because we've still got to deal with Žižka, and we learn that he's not just some bandit causing mischief as he was painted by von Bergov and by Henry. He's a man with ideals, with a sense of justice, and he hates István just as much as you do. Žižka is allied with those who would fight in the favor of Wenceslas. The bandits we've been seeking to kill, the bandits that von Bergov sent us here to fight, they're our allies. It flips the earlier fight with Žižka on its head a bit, because while Henry is fighting in the name of honor, that working for the shadows is inherently bad, that came from the assumption that Žižka was his enemy. But now we know he's not. This starts to break down Henry's own moral code a bit. It doesn't get explored here, but this is the flame that lights the fuse. But that begs the question, where exactly is von Bergov, and what the fuck did he want out of all of this? Before that though, we get a moment to rest, a moment to help the people of Nabokov and orient ourselves after the insane whiplash of allegiance. You patch your wounds, you talk to a few familiar faces from Nabokov, now not under any false pretenses. The game always takes its time for you to get to know people. It never doesn't put in effort. You can also head into the cell and speak to a couple of the guys from Trosky who were taken prisoner, Black Bartosz and Herman Littlehead from the feast. It's a really bizarre feeling having friends on both sides, and that's where things started to click for me. The reason Trosky was structured like this, it's to give you a total perspective, At first, you know Trosky as a friend, a home base. It's full of people you helped, shared drinks with, defended, went on arduous quests for, a diverse set of people from all different backgrounds. Some you even held prejudices against yourself. But now, the story tells you they're the enemy. And suddenly, that familiarity is flipped, because these people aren't bad. They haven't done anything to you personally. Their lord just doesn't back Wenceslas. That's it. And it leaves you questioning, why do we fight? And who are we actually fighting? Surely not the people of Trosky. They only support Sigismund out of circumstance because their lord backs Sigismund. And so that question lingers. It doesn't get an answer, yet, but it plants the seed to get us thinking about our own loyalties and whether they too are born of true loyalty or simply circumstance. This is reinforced too. If you go back to characters like Lord Semyon later in the game, you can discuss what happened at the wedding and his relationship to von Bergov. It's all circumstantial, and he's more loyal to Henry because he knows him. It's really wonderful. There's something oddly peaceful about this lull. Even Hans has come to a sense of calm with one of the more poignant quotes from the game.
I have arrived at the conclusion that a bad day is just a bad day. And it doesn't mean your whole life is fucked up. And also, things always look better in the morning. The sooner I lie down, the better chance there is of nothing else fucking up today.
It's really simple. It's kind of childish, but I think it's really nice. In a game full of clever people postulating politics and philosophy, Hans says something just human. It kind of reminds you of the whole point, the beauty in life. But the calm can't last for long. Our question is answered. Here is Otto von Bergov. He stands before Nabokov with Istvan, Eric, and Markvart von Aulitz. After a violent skirmish and a cannon to the tower, we are, unfortunately, prisoners again. This game clearly has a reverence for Bethesda openings, this time back in Trosky Castle, for the climax of the first half of the game. The escape from Trosky Castle is the moment everything starts to uncoil. It's chaotic and bitter, and nothing about it feels heroic. You're like rats scurrying about, and before the night is through, you'll be brought down to their level. You're freed, of course, by Catherine. All this time, she was one of Žižka's allies. That's why he killed his own man at the pond. Catherine wasn't a random damsel in need of saving. She was an ally, and a crucial one in Žižka's plans. Istvan is also here. He sends Eric away, in a scene that humanizes them both to an extreme degree, and after seeing Eric from Godwin's point of view, it's hard not to feel something. I will also say, because I'm feeling it again watching this scene back, is it just me, or is there a manipulation angle here? I do believe that Istvan loves Eric, but the way he says, "you've grown into a capable young man," implies he knew him when he was a kid, and we know Istvan must be like 20 years older than Eric, which maybe implies grooming here? I think their relationship is complex, and given the time period, large gaps in age aren't foreign, but I do think analytically there is more going on here between them than just two guys who love each other. It feels like there's maybe a greater power dynamic at play, perhaps a subtle mirroring of Henry and RETROSPECTIVE, although more of a father-son angle with the latter. I don't think RETROSPECTIVE wants to fuck us. I hope. Regardless, with no gear, no weapons, barely any fucking health, we crawl through the castle, killing anyone in our way and making our way up to Istvan. This is the scene we've been waiting for years. Since 2018, when we found Istvan was a major player, that he was responsible for not warning RETROSPECTIVE about Skalitz when he rode off with Henry's sword. Finally, we have him, alone, and it's a one-on-one, and we get to choose. The way Henry is framed in this scene, the way that he's lit, the burning red fire from one side, and the cold lightning from the storm lighting up his other side that's otherwise shrouded in shadow. For a man preaching about honor earlier, he sure as hell doesn't seem to care now. Of the choices, I felt the best thematically was to kill Istvan dishonorably. I believe this entire sequence is built to whittle down Henry and the player. It's not worth the honor to risk letting him go again, and Henry is currently fueled by rage. We've been through so much, we simply need to kill him. I also felt Henry was obviously going on an arc, and the most satisfying would be for him to kill him in the most dishonorable way, to slowly then bring ourselves out of that pit. And so, Istvan is dealt with. But the kill doesn't land the way revenge is supposed to, or the way that you think it should. It's hollow, and it doesn't settle anything in Henry's soul. The sword is back in your hands, but it feels heavier, blood-soaked. Henry's symbol of honor drenched in the opposite. Because revenge doesn't restore, it corrodes. Henry's dream of Istvan confirms it. He's haunted not necessarily by Istvan, but the version of himself who could become Istvan, who maybe already has. The sword has changed hands, but are the hands that wield it quite that different? The castle that felt like the oppressive force of nobility becomes an even deeper metaphor. These walls have witnessed cruelty, alliance, betrayal, love, agony, and now they're watching Henry. Every decision he's made has brought him here, and Eric will eventually have to discover what became of the man he loves. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has spent its entire first half making sure every fucking person you meet is real, grounded, that they exist to you. Nothing is superficial, every connection feels like a connection, and when that is the case, actions start to feel incredibly real too. Every time you kill, every time you steal, and throwing Istvan from that window made me smile until I remembered that fact, until I remembered Eric. Maybe it was a mistake, but you can't take it back. You just have to live. And in a good RPG, complexity is key. Seeing Istvan as nothing more than simply a villain would be shallow, and your choices would be too. The weight of your own actions is one of the cornerstones of any truly strong role-playing game, and this moment is one of the truly greatest examples of that. This is why I wanted to outline all of the examples I discussed, why I wanted to retread the narrative piece by piece, because every little detail works to this end, to this tremendous fucking crescendo of storytelling. Every single side quest, every single choice, the conflict with Hans, the way it introduces you to the world, its people and its rulers is crucial to the way it deconstructs the very foundation of Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 by this end point. But this isn't the end. This is only halfway, and so when you head to Kuttenberg, it's not to continue this fight. You just won. It's to reckon with what fighting has made of you. The people who felt like enemies weren't, and the revenge you thought was purpose wasn't. Henry walks forward because he has to, but for the first time, he's not entirely sure what direction that is, only that turning back isn't an option, and he's picked his side. And despite the inner turmoil, the sun rises on the new region. And you know what they say about the morning. Things always look better. So we're like an hour and a half in and we've only just got to Kuttenberg. I really didn't think this would be that long. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, Kuttenberg was always kind of the biggest allure of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and before release, and even before this moment here, I thought when they said it was two separate maps, one map would literally just be the city, and another one would be the countryside outside of the city, to allow the game better optimization, to not have the issues of RATI be present. Although, I'll be real, I'm hardly an expert on what causes those issues. You can have a 50-90 and you aren't hitting 60 FPS in RATI. It ain't physically possible. But no, as it turns out, Kuttenberg is a map unto itself, a map that I'd say is probably about the size of KCD1, but I'm just going off vibes here. Kuttenberg the city is just a small part of what is otherwise a whole other world to explore. But this new map does something else. It marks a significant shift in pacing. It's effectively a reset point. It feels somewhat like starting a brand new game, and while that somewhat sounds compelling because of the feeling of, holy shit, we have so much left to do, and what could possibly happen, I found this reset to feel somewhat startling and harmful to the experience. It reminded me of the third act of Days Gone, or the second half of Tales of Arise. There being more game isn't the issue. I mean, The Witcher 3 is segmented into 3 acts as well. The issue comes from its execution. I spoke to several people who echoed how I was feeling at the time too. At first, you're enamored with what to do next, with the plot setup of finding Liechtenstein and freeing Hans, who, by the way, I forgot to mention, ended up a prisoner again. But slowly, as you get set up, as you're introduced to the Devil's Den, as you ride across the world, as you find allies to help, you can't help but feel this sense of momentum being dropped, in a way that, to me, made me take a pretty large break. In Trosky, it started from scratch because it was the start of the game. That's normal, that's what I hope you'd expect happens. You explore, you do side quests as you progress and gain better gear and levels, and it all feels focused in tandem to create one cohesive experience, like I explored. It's all conceived together in a way that is balanced, gradual, and thematically coherent. Now, I'm not saying that Kuttenberg totally drops the ball, the quality doesn't fall off a cliff or anything, but it can take a mental leap to readjust to the game just starting again on you midway through. Let me draw a comparison to The Witcher 3 again to maybe illustrate what I mean here a little bit better. In The Witcher 3, it's all separated into acts and arcs within those acts. White Orchard is the tutorial, the prologue. It doesn't have a huge aim beyond finding Yennefer, it's low stakes and it's short. You know that finding Yen is simply the task you need to achieve for the game to actually start. Once you do, you're thrown into Act 1 in Velen in search of Ciri. Each arc the game explores is always in service of the greater goal of finding Ciri, and so the game allows itself 3 stories within the first act, which is one of 3. Which sounds confusing, but that's only because I said it in a stupid way, and I won't try again. The arcs center on stories within Velen, Novigrad, and Skellige, which are always secondary to the larger journey, and so when you finish with the Baron and move on to Novigrad, you never feel like you're restarting, merely that the momentum has been redirected. The momentum in The Witcher 3 only shifts once you do find Ciri, but the game knows this, and so the final 2 acts work as prep for the final battle and the final battle, rather than more of what Act 1 did. In KCD2, the goal is to deliver a letter to von Berghoff with the underlying hunt for Istvan. Once that's done though, once our work takes a strange turn with Žižka, once Istvan is dealt with, we now have no aim beyond the larger goal of stopping Sigismund. We are literally starting fresh. While freeing Hans and finding Liechtenstein makes sense logically, it doesn't feel like anything the game was ever building towards. They are new tasks that we are now beginning from Phase 1. Nothing established in KCD1 or in Trosky carries over into the second half. Everything it was building towards is complete, so now the game has to build again from scratch, but without any of the character building that the start of the game would usually have because you've already done it. Kuttenberg feels less like a second act and more like a second game. And look, for you that might be awesome. More game is epic, right? But I think it severely harms investment in what you're doing, and this carries over to the actual world space itself and its lack of cohesion in comparison to Trosky. Exploring Kuttenberg suffers from a lack of focus compared to Trosky, as well as poor contextualization. In the first half of the game, we are forced to interact with the world and its people because that's the only way we can accomplish the goal of getting into the wedding to deliver the letter. The context of the main quest and the side quests go hand in hand because this is the situation that we've been placed within. Exploration is natural because the main quest is loose and unurgent, and to complete it, we are forced to build ourselves up, which requires exploration. In Kuttenberg, there is no reason to go off and help some guy in the cemetery, or join up with the Thieves Guild, or go hunting bandits. By this point, you have gear, you have a good horse, you have money, you have a home and a castle, and there is no need for you, as Henry, to go off and do any of this extra stuff. In Trosky, not only was it contextualized well, it was also incentivized by how hard the game starts. You need experience, you need gear, you need money. Doing these side stories are a benefit to you, and then along the way they build on the game's theming. In Kuttenberg, it feels far more like KCD1. It's additional stuff to do if you feel like it. The quality never wavers, it's all still interesting and compelling for the most part, but it feels like it lacks real direction, purpose, and focus in a way that Trosky excelled at. In this half of the game, you have a clear job to do, and the tools and allies to do it. Heading off into the wilderness to help a herb lady does not feel conducive to a goal, and therefore made engaging with any of the side content in the game feel far less interesting as a result. This, coupled with the restart of the main quest having to start from square one narratively without starting from square one mechanically, just led me to taking a break from playing for like a week or so. And then when I did pick it back up, I wasn't putting in the 6 to 8 hour sessions like before. This is not going to be a universal problem, but these videos are always an expression of my own experience. And for me, the transition from Trosky to Kuttenberg felt stunted, and the contextualization of the world and its content was lacking to a degree that pushed me away rather than drew me in. I think you could have done this without losing me. I think even just making Kuttenberg noticeably harder than Trosky would have given me a reason to go off and get stronger. But from the moment I got there, I was able to take down whole groups of guys with no issue. By the time you finish Trosky, you are as powerful as you need to be until you finish the game. I will note that patch 1.3 that came out in May of 2025 along with the Barber update included a change that makes the Kuttenberg region a bit more challenging, which is really vague, and I personally didn't notice a difference in difficulty, but I'd also long finished the main quest by then. The only instance I had at all after this patch of finding an encounter tough was one in Opatowitz as part of an investigation in the Legacy of the Forge DLC, where I got fucking owned. But I just chalked it up to fighting like a massive group of the highest level guys in the game, and maybe they were specifically scaled up for that DLC mission. But that could have been a result of the update. That said, based on my research of other people's opinions, this update seemingly changed very little other than frequency of attacks and a reduction in your own damage output, or it's literally the devil itself and ruined the entire game. So it's hard to say, really, short of replaying the whole thing on patch 1.3, or higher. But there was one way I could kinda check. I've been using this footage pretty frequently of a fight around the beginning of Kuttenberg, where you fight a big group of bandits if you fuck up the dialogue. I was able to very easily dispatch all of them with only the best gear from the Trosky region, which feels unbalanced. So, that's my test. Let's see if I can still do that. So I booted up an old save, and I could still do it. Although I did find it marginally more difficult, but honestly that could have been chalked up to pure chance or being used to having stronger gear and better perks. It just wasn't noticeable enough to feel conclusive. So I don't know, I think my conclusion is that maybe patch 1.3 did make the game harder, but not enough to address the criticisms I had in the first place. But hey, look, I'm not here to just shit on Kuttenberg, even if I did think it was valid criticism, because if you were to come away thinking I disliked this whole half of the game, you'd be wrong, and I can't let that be the case. I think it's flawed, I think it's less than Trosky, but that doesn't make it valueless. The city itself is integral to the themes of this act of the game. Kuttenberg is brimming with life. From the moment you wander through the gates on your horse to a rich, vibrant town square, you see people going about their day, selling wares, talking to each other, buildings and stalls and carts and a fountain here in the middle of the city. It's a city with a diverse range of peoples, and that's important. KCD1 is about Henry entering a world that he's been told about. Everything is exactly as it should be, and his relationship with the nobility reinforces that. Whereas KCD2 is about him discovering the reality of the world, about stepping outside of the box that he's been placed within and that he's placed others in. And Kuttenberg being this melting pot of different cultures is really necessary. It shows a vast range of opinions and cultures, and they're all in one place. There aren't lines to divide them anymore, like in the countryside where the nomads lived in a faraway camp or the humans were forced out of town. Here, everyone just lives together, and they have to adapt to that. Henry has to adapt to that, and it's key to a perspective shift. I do wish, though, that Henry maybe commented on this. The only real opinion we hear from him, other than about the fountain, is during one of the bathhouse side quests. Beyond that, though, Henry never comments on how he feels about Kuttenberg, either culturally or visually. No wonder and amazement, nothing at all, actually, and that feels like a waste. I will say, though, one of the ways the game does tackle the exploration of other cultures in this region is with Musa of Mali. Musa is a really interesting character who, because of his well-travelled nature, has far less stakes in this war and is far more a man who cares for individuals and knowledge above all. I think Henry being exposed to someone so different from him, who has such a wider knowledge of different countries and cultures, is integral to opening his eyes to the truth of the world outside of his own bubble. I also just think Muse is a really nice guy to talk to. I like him a lot. I've always enjoyed in games like this, RPGs, where you meet someone that comes from outside of this, like, your immediate game world. There's something really, like, exciting about it, because it's you getting to speak to someone who knows about the things that go on out of bounds, in a sense. I loved asking him questions about all the different countries and cities that he'd been to. It's just really fun. I really like it. Kuttenberg the city is tremendous, though, from a game perspective. It is so detailed and immersive and full of energy. It's really a whole world in and of itself. I think it's truly up there with some of the best immersive cities in games. Night City, Saint Denis, it's got that level of density while retaining interactivity that's hard to find even in some of the most convincing and well-built video game cities. Where Skyrim condensed its cities for the sake of the hardware of the time and the level of interactivity they had, Kuttenberg is sort of what it would have been awesome to see in a game like Skyrim. It's sprawling with so many different districts, shops, and buildings with absolutely no loading screens, unlike every Bethesda release ever. It also runs flawlessly. I didn't notice a single frame drop, and that's wild, given when I replayed KCD1, it was a terrifying technical nightmare. KCD2 has to be one of the best optimized games in recent memory. The only real issue is with the draw distance of shadows and buildings and lights, and that just can't be increased because of CryEngine or something. I don't know, I read that somewhere. I've tried searching for the source, and even then, I think the source was just like some guy on the Steam forums, so I guess you're just gonna have to trust me on that one, like I had to trust them. Although, if we're being real, the draw distance issues are no worse than Cyberpunk, and they don't destroy the experience. It'd be nice if they were better, obviously, but it's not something as bad as lighting not working, or frames dropping constantly, or actual game-breaking bugs. It's just a symptom of Warhorse using a fuck-ass engine to create their RPG, although the fact the game is optimized as well as it is incredibly astounding. All this is to say, the game runs smooth as butter, and the large city with tons of NPCs doesn't seem to make a dent. Unlike me, when I hammer away at the anvil all afternoon. Okay, I've neglected to discuss blacksmithing, and the reason is really because I didn't do all that much of it until Kuttenberg, and even then, I didn't do much outside of quests. I do think it's an interesting mechanic. I don't think it's heavily encouraged, though. I look forward to the DLC where we start up our own blacksmithing shop, so I have a reason to do this. Again, DLC-focused video on Patreon, because despite it not having incredible utility, it is superbly immersive. You have all the steps to get the metal hot, hammer away at the correct parts, keeping in rhythm as to not hammer it unevenly, and to do this, Henry will hum tracks from KCD1, making them pieces of music that diegetically exist in the world. I told you I'd do it, never doubt me again! I, however, cannot figure out for the life of me what the timing is. I'll hit it in what I think is in time, and I'll fuck it up. I'll try some different timing, and I'll still fuck it up. I'll ignore the whistling, and somehow I'm right? Make it make sense, game. I have no idea what the fuck you actually want from me. Hammering horseshoes is also possibly top 5 worst tasks of all time. Seeing as we're in the major city of the game, I think now is a perfect time to discuss the late game economy, which, similar to our real world, is somewhat fucked. Money in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 doesn't function the same way it did in the first game, and by the time you reach the city, you have everything you could ever need to buy, which also makes having money kind of pointless, given there is nothing to actually spend it on. I'm sure when that blacksmithing DLC comes out, I clearly wrote this script months ago, we'll finally be able to invest it all like we did with Pribyslavitz from the first game, so this is one of those talking points that won't really matter all that much a year from now, is what I said when I originally wrote this segment in April of 2025, but the DLC is now out, and it of course does give us the purpose for our money. However, that is paid DLC, and so for those who can't afford it, or just never buy it, their game's economy still feels unbalanced. However, there is a greater issue that I think affects late game economy, and that is simply how vendors function compared to the first game. And this is something I alluded to in the stealth section a bit ago. In the first game, when you sold things to vendors, they would eventually sell those items. The more you sold to them, the more money they would make. Eventually, if you sold lots to them, their money pool would be massive, and you would be able to sell more at once for more gain. Or you could find their vendor chest, which was accessible somewhere, and steal all of their money. And since they would always sell goods for higher value than you could, it made far more sense to sell everything you steal to them, even when their money pouch is empty. So in 3 to 5 days, you could rob them blind and make a huge profit. This was, of course, a fucking exploit, let's not get it twisted, but it always also felt like it was an intentional exploit. If you were careful and understood how the economy worked, and also understood that vendors stored their money somewhere, you could be clever after leveling your thievery skills to make lots of money in a way that felt genuinely smart. It was playing into that immersive sim framework I talked about earlier. In KCD 2, they clearly wanted to try and stop this, now well-known exploit, from ruining the early game, and to do this, they completely altered how vendors work, meaning there actually is no longer an economy that you can interact with at all. Vendors have preset amounts of money that cannot be raised, they do not sell your goods, and it always refills to the same number every 3 to 5 days. This means you end up with tons of stolen goods, nobody to sell them to because there are some items you will always be forced to take a loss on, and no real reason to even bother doing so, killing the entire system of trading. KCD1 was exploitable, but it was also immersive. I think these kinds of exploits are kind of the price you pay for having a game with this level of player agency and immersion. Players kind of need to be able to break the game through ingenuity, because discovering there are invisible rules at play when most of the game is so open-ended feels frustrating. In trying to fix an exploit, what really happened was a detraction of game feel without actually doing anything to improve the overall player experience. I think you could have made this exploit less game-breaking without removing it entirely. Maybe make the chests in very hard-to-reach places that takes timing and skill to properly break into without being caught, adding a higher level of risk to pulling it off. Any number of slight changes would have been preferable to what we got. In fact, I think leaving it exactly as it was would have been preferable, because while broken, it was more fun. And I think all of this summarizes the issues with the second half of the game. Progression is unnecessary because you're already strong enough, making economy and trading pointless. Side questing becomes purely a thing to do in a video game for the player because of a lack of incentive or proper contextualization that was present in Trosky, and a resetting of goals rather than a redirection of momentum, killing all pacing while the game slowly winds up again. The second half of the game isn't bad. I don't think that, and I don't want to convey that, but it is flawed in a way the first half of the game wasn't. The second half of the game is still good. It's still got quality writing and endearing characters, powerful world building, and a deeply immersive world. but Trosky was one of the best RPGs I've ever played. Being just great is always going to feel like a step down, especially when juxtaposed in the same game. Between gathering the Devil's Gang and tracking down Samuel in the Jewish quarter with a synagogue you also can't enter, fuck you. Oh, sorry, Henry was a bit sleepy when I recorded this. Finding Liechtenstein and figuring out a way to free Capon, I started to feel a little disillusioned with the game, and the whole journey up until this point had been a very personal one. But maybe that's the point. Okay, so I buried the lead a little bit there. Kuttenberg might actually be worse than Trosky, intentionally, but I needed to establish how it was lesser so I could explore why it being lesser might be done on purpose. Okay, maybe not on purpose. I don't know if it was intentionally designed this way to evoke a feeling, and if you still found it to be less compelling and or fun, I get it. And hey, yeah, I might be overanalyzing this, but like, come on, what did you expect? That all said, I do think the second half of the game being less focused might actually enhance the themes, which sounds insane, but hear me out, okay? I think Disillusionment is a key part of the game's thematic core, especially for the second half of the game, and so transposing that onto the player, making you feel aimless after the personal journey and quest is over, after killing Istvan and getting your sword back, is kind of fucking fire. It uses an unfocused approach to design to make the player feel what Henry feels now that his personal quest is through, and he has to reckon with a war that maybe he has no honest stakes in. Up until this point, we've been fueled by revenge and a sense of righteous justice, but now what are we doing? We want Capon back, but why do we personally care about Wenceslas versus Sigismund on an actual political level? Because we've been told to. Because we were saved by supporters of Wenceslas. Because of circumstance. To explore this core theme, I have a couple of main examples from the second half of the game to talk about. After dicking around with the Rutards and getting to know this beautiful fair maiden, we head through her secret passage. The family castle's not... never mind. This leads to Malashov, their familial castle that has been taken over by our enemies, and where Hans is being held. A bunch of stuff happens here that we'll return to later, I think. Just bear with me. After a lot of tries to do this flawlessly, we eventually get Hans out of the castle along with our new French ally, who I'm sure we can trust, and we ride through the woods to freedom. As we exit the trees, we come upon a small village, torched, a person hanged from a tree, everyone dead. Hans is horrified at the havoc and destruction, and Brabant, who's the French guy, explains that it's the nature of war, that most wars are fought and won from behind enemy lines with a stab in the back rather than a confrontation in battle. Hans exclaims a line that I think remains important throughout the game.
That's not war, it's barbarism.
Hans thinks, unlike most nobility, from an angle of morality, of the value of human life lost, of the loss of honor. He believes the lie that war is honorable. Brabant explains how torching this village would weaken the enemy because now they lose important resources that would contribute to their war efforts, and that a village could harbor spies and saboteurs or even supply the enemy, and therefore destroying what could be an enemy asset is an effective tool of war. And he's not wrong, that is an effective tool of war. The issue is that Hans got it wrong. War is barbarism. It's inherently ugly and evil, and to fight war effectively means you have to be ugly and evil too. Nobody ever wins a war through head-on battles between armies, as Brabant says. There aren't even that many of them. Henry is yet to be subject to the truth of this, and this is only the start. So far, we've worked in the shadows, we've done ugly things, but always in the name of justice and sticking it to those responsible for burning Skalitz and killing our family. They are evil, and we are good. The end justifies the means, because the end is something that matters to us personally. Our side would never burn a village down. We're the good guys. They're evil for this, and for Skalitz. Brabant seems pretty certain that this probably had to be done, that there was justification for it in war. He wants to scrub clean responsibility from whoever did this, because that's just good warfare. There isn't room for sentimentality. This then rears its head again later. During the quest Dancing with the Devil, we've been sucked into a whole whirlwind of politics that ultimately doesn't mean a thing to us, but we're a part of this, and we're sent to Malashov once again, this time to go after von Bergov, who's kidnapped my wife after a whole other quest party thing where Godwin gets Capon engaged against his will, and we also find out his dad is still around, so Godwin isn't quite as old as he looks, I guess? Look, it's not important for what I'm talking about. During this quest, the devil, the leader of the pack, orders them to torch the village as a distraction, so they can get into the castle and complete their mission without taking casualties. You can agree, if you have no media literacy, or you can push back, refuse to kill innocents. Despite it being a better tactical move, it's of course morally reprehensible and not something Henry would consider doing given what happened in Skalitz. You push back, the devil says it's on our head if any of his men die here because of our compassion, and they push on. You expect shit like this from the devil. He's a criminal and he's dishonorable, and we're only working with him because we have the same goal and support Wenceslas. He's a tool, not someone we trust. But when we reach Zizka, he too is frustrated. This was his plan.
We're at war, if you hadn't fucking noticed.
This is a core moment in flipping the narrative once again. We go from trying to ally with von Bergov and fighting these bandits to allying with them and realizing they're friends of RETROSPECTIVE and Hanush, to observing that they do the exact same heinous shit as the opposing side. They are on our side politically, but not Henry's morally. War is dirty, and Henry's morals don't work here, and can't be applied without compromising their mission. I think the only real issue here is that Zizka's side is never given legitimacy. Someone needed to die here, so that if you choose not to talk to the village, there is at least some sort of loss. But actually, everyone survives, and so it makes the moral complexity of the choice kind of null and void. There is only one correct choice. If someone died, or multiple people died, there would have been a reason to feel regret. We lost men because Henry couldn't do what needed to be done. But no, everything is fine, which makes the torching of the village and all this talk of we can't fight an entire army stupid and lessens the impact of the narrative flip on our allies. There needs to be a part of Henry that wonders if he made the correct choice here or not, so that he can understand why other leaders might have made the choice he couldn't for the sake of the men under their command. It still works, but this issue kind of lessens the impact a little. The third example is a major one. During the King's Gambit, Henry is tasked with infiltrating Sigismund's city council in Kuttenberg as a wine bearer. Look, basically he's a waiter. During this, we get our first real look at Sigismund, a character that we've only ever really heard about, someone who we formed a very strong opinion of based on hearsay and second-hand chatter, but it turns out that he's fine. He's flawed, and I don't think he's suddenly painted as the good guy, but that's not what Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is ever trying to say. Wenceslas, for all the rallying done in his name, was always absent and indulgent and painfully passive. The opening sequence of KCD1 that plays every time you launch the game reminds you of that very fact.
He neglected affairs of state for more frivolous pursuits.
Sigismund, meanwhile, is here, commanding, taking control of the chaos his brother would have abandoned, and it forces Henry to confront the uncomfortable reality that despite not being the designated heir to Charles IV, he's actually probably the ruler that Bohemia needs, not because of his blood, but his effort. He's doing what Wenceslas never would. He's trying his best. And yet that doesn't make him right. Sigismund isn't noble or just, he's deeply flawed. But in a world that's falling apart at the seams, his flaws start to feel understandable. Can you say you'd act differently in his stead? How do you rule a country in this state? It muddies the water completely. And so now our fight for the good, noble king to return feels a little naive, and it does beg the question if there ever was one to begin with, or if there ever can be one. We end up in a pretty tricky position as Henry. What is he even fighting for anymore? The sword's been reclaimed, Istvan is dead, the man he blamed for the burning of his village, and yet the war goes on. The cause that gave his pain meaning and directed it continues once his quest feels complete. But we're still taking orders, we're still completing missions, we're still killing people, still being sent to castles and council chambers, still fighting at the sides of men who torch villages and call it strategy. Henry doesn't care about crowns, he doesn't bleed loyalty for Wenceslas, and his hate for Sigismund comes from a personal loss at the hands of their war. He's here because he was saved by people who happened to be on one side of this destructive squabble, and now he's entrenched in it, even as the reasons to be grow thinner. This is what makes the second half of the game so compelling, even if it's messier. It's about the existential drift that sets in once the personal stakes are gone, once revenge and justice have been replaced with duty. It's about Henry being swallowed by a war that was never his to begin with, and how easy it is to mistake circumstance for conviction. He's not really fighting for anything anymore. He's just fighting. And in doing that, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 begins to turn inward on itself, to be critical of the ideas that the first game presented to Henry, and this war and the cause you're fighting for might never have mattered as much as the people who died for it. And with that, there begins a creeping unease that something just isn't sitting right with Henry. Across the game, we get several sequences where Henry falls into a dream state. Sometimes he's confronted by Istvan, and sometimes by his own father. These dream sequences are integral to understanding Henry's psychological state. He's constantly at war with himself. These dreams work to explore the fallout internally for the actions he chooses at major crossroads, be it killing Istvan and being haunted by the memory of him, feeling himself falling further down that path, or the choice to burn the town or not at Malashov, and the struggle we see with his own morals in a fight where they can't exist. The dreams with Martin are a lot more reflective, where Istvan berates him. His father instead tries his best to guide him. After Istvan's death, when you sleep for the first time in Sukdol, we see the Martin within Henry ask him if killing Istvan helped, to which Henry tells him it did, not entirely convincingly, but Martin asks what comes next, to which Henry says this, and the scene plays on.
Markvart von Auritz is next. Then von Burkov.
And is that what you really want, son? No matter how many people you kill, you can't change what's happened.
It's what I want.
Are you sure, Henry?
This is such a genuinely chilling scene. We are peering deeper into Henry than we ever have before. The vulnerability on display here, the regret and guilt and uncertainty, the way he feels so lost, we feel so lost, which we already explored, becomes manifest in the game's second half. Henry's been doing what he's been doing for such a while now that his own view of himself is coming apart at the seams. What I really admire though is how this becomes reflected in some of the side quests. Bella Torres and Skeleton in the Closet has Henry team up with Jan Posey and his brother Miroslav to get revenge on the humans who stole the remains of their dead father. Kinda sounds a little similar in a few ways to our situation. I can't say that it's particularly deep, and there's nothing like the stuff in Trosky that played directly into the core themes of the story, but it's there nonetheless, and it works as a means for Henry to see aspects of himself from the outside. Similarly to this, in the quest Primum non Lucere, you have a task that is part of a larger quest to find a Thunderstone, which is unimportant. Don't ask me what a Thunderstone is, I still do not know. It's a whole bunch of fetch quests, it's really not that good, but this task is particularly nice. A woman, Malada, who has the stone you need, is using it thinking it will heal her husband. You offer your services to heal him in return for the stone, which she'd no longer need. Upon observing him, you come to realize that nothing is physically wrong with him. It's his mind. Peter has PTSD and anxiety. Of course, there's only so much of a deep dive you can do during a time period like this without totally breaking immersion, but I think it serves its purpose. Henry helps him. He understands the man somewhat and works on a remedy to help him sleep and advice to slowly build him back up again. This is Henry seeing his own fragility from the outside. The fact he's plagued by nightmares, sometimes waking ones that depict the death of his parents, the fear of it happening again, just like Peter remembers the horrors of war and the possibility that Sigismund comes for Sukdol next. War worms its way into the hearts of the lives of everyone it touches, large or small, and infects them. Only with unity and understanding can we hope to crawl out of that hole. Which I think also speaks to what Hans has been going through. This entire game, he's been too grappling with his own anxieties about his self-worth, his nobility, his ability next to Henry, and that fear manifests as claustrophobia after Nabokov when the castle comes crashing down on top of them. For a large stretch of the game, Hans cannot enter confined spaces, he's terrified of them, and I think it's a symbolic representation of his fear that he's not good enough, that he can't overcome what Hanush thinks of him, and he'll never be the man he thinks Henry is. Hans faces hardships across the game, and when faced with his own vulnerability, when he admits that to himself, he can overcome it. When he works with others and admits he sometimes needs help, he becomes a stronger man and a better noble. Through this, Hans grows empathy for the common man, and that's a huge journey to undertake, especially beside Henry, and in a game that aims to deconstruct the society of the period. Across all these encounters, Henry repeatedly meets reflections of himself in others. Jan and Miroslav press on with vengeance as relentlessly as Henry does. The troubled Peter embodies the scared boy Henry was that day in Skalitz, and in many ways still is. Hans acts as a mirror to Henry's sometimes stubbornness and works as an indicator to ask for help, that unity gets us through the darkest of times. Henry often becomes the guide or counselor they need, offering clear-eyed advice and compassion, yet internally, he struggles to grant himself the same grace. He has to cope with his own unchecked wounds alone, which is, yeah, I mean, that's pretty relatable. It's easy to give advice to other people, but far harder to give advice to yourself. His visions even mirror him. Istvan's taunts and the visions of his parents try their best to make him see the truth of his actions and the path that he's treading. But when you've seen so much and done so much, it can be difficult to see yourself from an outside perspective, when what you're doing gave your grief direction. How do you stop? And what do you do next? This half of the game becomes thematically messy. I still think that. It feels like it's fighting itself. I don't think that makes it bad, though. In fact, I think the game's themes still shine through despite the incoherence. It mirrors Henry's own internal conflict, lost in a war he no longer believes in, that he never really believed in to begin with. Henry fights for personal reasons, not allegiance to a king or his policies. Had circumstances changed, he might just as easily have backed Sigismund. It has nothing to do with ideals and everything to do with his personal relationship to these people, how their actions affected him personally. The same kind of practical loyalty we see in figures like Jobst, and even to an extent, von Berghoff. It's just that we're in Henry's head, so we think he's justified, that there is a greater noble goal here. But there isn't. Where von Berghoff seeks what better lines his pockets, and Jobst seeks what retains greater stability of his power, Henry seeks simply to aim his fight towards those people who wronged him on a personal level, and this second half is all about stumbling to find purpose amongst that. So yes, this stretch of the game is messy. Narratively, it wanders. But emotionally, the confusion kinda lands. The war stops making sense because it never actually made sense. Wars don't. And from that chaos, we discover a sort of truth that comes from pure exhaustion, really. And from that exhaustion, we enter the final act, where everything that's been presented finally gets explored and confronted outright. And I think for the most part, it's done remarkably. I've skipped over a lot of details to get to the climax, and honestly, I don't apologize for it. If you wanted a full summary of the game, you'd either watch a Let's Play or play the game yourself. We aren't in 2020 anymore, my videos are no longer plot summaries, is what my therapist told me I need to repeat to myself at least twice a week in front of my mirror until the tears stop. After the Italian job, where Godwin and Henry and the gang deal with two warring factions of the same church that tried to find unity, a very fitting metaphor for the current state of the kingdom, we steal Sigismund's silver, find out Brabant was very French, Ada, who you don't know, dies, and we make it back to Sukdal. We begin Civitas Progenesis, which serves as a pivotal moment in Henry's journey, encapsulating the consequences of his past actions and setting the stage for the game's climax. Eric sends a message to Henry that he wants an honourable duel, and you can choose to ignore it, but that doesn't feel thematically right. Riding to the location of the old Sigismund camp, you find it in ruin, with Eric all alone sitting atop the hill. This obviously symbolizes isolation and the culmination of his solitary path of vengeance, but more than that, you ride here seeing yourself as the hero. You're an honorable man going to deal with the dishonorable Eric. But he very quickly shoots that down, repeating what Istvan said, that Henry is just like him.
You think you're better than me? That I've got blood on my hands, whilst you're some kind of defender of justice? Really? Just take a look at yourself. You're just like me. You murder in the name of revenge, and you don't care about anyone else.
And look, the dialogue here might be a little on the nose, but I think what Henry says in response adds depth.
You're nothing without Istvan. You're all alone. No one cares about you. Sigismund, Markvart, they've all abandoned you. To them, you're nothing more than a dead mercenary's lover.
Don't you dare bring Istvan's name into your mouth, you fucking bastard! I'll make sure that you die in pain. You'll suffer like the mangy fucking mutt you are!
Even if you succeed, you'll change nothing. You'll still be alone. All alone.
What Henry says to Eric here feels far more of a projection than anything else. Even if Henry succeeds, like he did with Istvan, to kill Markvart, it'll change nothing. He'll still be all alone. Revenge isn't purpose, it's just grief redirected. Eric is a symbol of Henry's mistakes, of grief and regret and guilt. Eric is a mirror of himself being pointed back at him, and this fight is more than just a culmination of revenge. In many ways, it's a representation of Henry's inner conflict with who he has become. It turns out that this was a trick, though. Eric lured Henry out while the army massed around Sukdal, and so Henry flees, returns, and it begins the siege. This sequence begins to break down, truly, the lessons learned across the game about war and allegiances, about life and death, by flipping the perspective of the ending of KCD-1. That game ended with a siege, but now the context is being reversed, and we're the ones trapped inside a castle for our theft and treachery against Sigismund. It's ironic, really. Markvart von Aulitz leads the army, and so this siege is both the final confrontation with the man who changed Henry's life, and also a mirror to the literal events of Skalitz, when the village was under attack from an army under the same command. So I guess Peter was also right. I'm sorry, man. Following quests have us live out the siege in the castle, a siege that in totality lasts around 4 weeks. You have to repel attacks, prepare soldiers under your command, make sure weapons are in good shape, raise morale, ration food, deal with horrendous hunger, and live in dirt and squalor the entire time. By locking the player in for several hours of playtime, it allows you to truly feel trapped, like a rat with nowhere to go. Probably how Istvan felt, holding out in Talmberg. But more than putting you in Istvan's shoes, it puts into perspective the hopelessness of war, the responsibility of lives put on the shoulders of young men barely older than those in their command, and sometimes younger than those in their command. There's one point you have to choose of your men who needs to go down below to burn the camp. Capon struggles with this task.
You want me and Henry to choose men to send to their certain death?
And Godwin, who's seen plenty of war, has to remind him that this is unfortunately what must be done.
You're a commander, so act like one.
In the face of the reality of war, Capon shows a very clear moral resistance, one that the player, hopefully at this point, shares. Capon's open disdain for war contrasts with Henry's constant forced participation in it. Your choice here matters too. You can lose men if you aren't careful with who you pick, because the rest will also be firing arrows from the ramparts with you and Capon, so you'd better pick the best archers for the job and the best swordsmen to go down, which adds weight to what you're doing, but also conveys the difficulty commanders face in war. It helps too that all of your men are people you know, be it friends, characters from side quests, or even a couple of Skalitz guards from the very first game. When the devil gets back with your men, regardless of how many you lose or save, he mentions he recognized one of them, someone he served with in Austria. It's difficult to process that. The idea that allegiances, sides, vassals, soldiers change at the drop of a hat. Those you once fought with might be those you fight against any other day, and the connections you forge in battle with your allies might make it harder when they are on the opposite side of your army another day. Even more though, the devil says that he thinks knowing the guy saved his life. The man he was fighting hesitated, and that allowed the devil to cut him down. This really struck me because to do that takes a type of dissonance that can only be forged in war, and that totally strips away humanity. The longer these men fight, the more experience they have in battle, the less human they become, the less their emotions and morals can drive them. You're experiencing in real time the loss of hope and belief that comes from days in battle, days of killing and days of starving, all in the name of a king you'll likely never know. This is compounded by the conversation you can have with Capon after.
I'm starting to think there's no way out this time. How many more men have to die before this is really over? I'm fed up with this. I don't want to send anyone else to their death. But maybe it'll be me who dies. And I won't care anymore. Kurva! Shishkin never should have put us in charge.
Capon is really struggling with this, not just with the choices he's forced to make, not just with the battle, but with the concept of war at all. It sickens him to have to send young men to their deaths, for this to perpetuate for no real reason. You can see just how much his experiences in this game have matured him, for better and for worse. And this is where the game's first half really comes back around. None of this experience, this meditating on death and killing and battle, would have as much weight were Kingdom Come Deliverance not in service of life most of the time. Like I talked about right at the top of the video, the way the game is built on a fundamental level is about life itself. The beauty of the natural world, the artistry of the people who inhabit it, the connection you form, the people you help, the good you do, the day-to-day shit like cooking and bathing and sleeping and eating. Love of life is at the heart of Kingdom Come Deliverance, and especially Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That beautiful world outside those castle walls is being stomped out by a war you're forced to take part in on behalf of men who are nowhere to be seen. This game celebrates life, which makes premature death in the service of war feel all the more evil. And as if you think it can't get any worse, we have a whole quest dedicated to starvation, as you have your nose to the ground looking for food as people sit around wounded as the bodies pile up, and you consider maybe eating the dog who roams the courtyard. I did think about it too. I wasn't sure who could die if I let it live, but ultimately I couldn't bring myself to do it. But the fact the game made me even consider eating a fucking dog means it's done a bloody good job of making me give a shit about these people and my actions. The bodies have to be buried, and Godwyn is the only religious man here to give a speech. This section is tremendous. After everything that's happened here, the loss of life, war snuffing out the beauty of the world, the starvation, the loss of hope, the last thing to go is faith. The core thing at the heart of KCD2. You can choose to quote a requiem or instead to make up your own sermon, which just feels right, both for Godwyn and for what the game is doing here.
As you all know, the faithful must be buried in consecrated ground. But do we have consecrated ground? We do not. A priest should give last rites to the dying. Say a requiem mass. But these poor souls will have none of these things.
Father?
And why should they? Do you think you need a priest for God to hear you? You don't. They are Simonists. They take money for baptism, for confession, for communion bread, for holy oils, for funerals too, even. You can't so much as set foot in a church without opening your purse. Do you think God only speaks Latin, and you need a priest to commune with him? Will our friends and comrades not be welcomed into his heavenly abode because they are not buried by a church? Nonsense. The law of God is above the law of the church, and thus let us bury them and pray for them by ourselves. God will hear you.
The law of God is above the law of the church is such a cold fucking line. The reality of what these people are going through puts into perspective their relationship with their faith. The church is vanity, selling belief as a commodity, when the truth of faith is that it should permeate your life regardless of social standing and wealth. These men do not lose faith in God, but instead faith in the structures that use God to their own benefit, which shows how war can often bring out truths that were previously buried under platitudes and facades, which brings us to the major culmination of this sequence of the entire game. Henry leaves the castle with his secret half-brother Samuel. Yeah, look, I forgot to mention that, but it's not something I wanted to dissect for the purposes of this video. If you have something interesting worth discussing with regards to the Samuel story, go ahead and drop it below. I'll try and read it. So, Henry leaves the castle in the hopes of riding away and getting help from the boys back in Rattay. Sam gets captured by Brabant, and honestly, mechanically, this section is tremendous. There is so much choice and so much direct consequence. Sam can die here. You can never find Brabant. You can leave Sam after you find him. You can kill Brabant and save Sam, and most importantly, you can choose to go and find Markvart. This scene is perhaps one of the greatest I've ever played in a game of this genre. To take a concept H-Bomber Guy talked about in his video on Fallout 3, where the original Fallout games end not with a battle or a set piece, but with a simple conversation with one guy, a guy who represents all the themes in the game, a conversation with a man in a room, Markvart is KCD2's man in the room. Henry's final confrontation with Markvart von Owlitz isn't the satisfying vengeance you might have expected from that quest sitting on your log for the entirety of the first game. It's quiet and reflective, and it has to be. Kingdom Come has never been about the most simple resolution. The entire game has shown us that, and Markvart, of all people, isn't the monster that Henry had painted him as, no matter how much easier that conclusion might be. He's just a man. As human as anyone we've met. What? You didn't think now is when KCD2 would drop the pretense of giving pages of depth to every single character you talk to, did you? I've seen some criticism for this scene, which reminds me a little bit of Last of Us 2 discourse, which I will not be getting into in this video. Go direct your discourse to that video I made before. But a lot of people couldn't accept that Markvart is human. He burned Skalitz, he killed our family, he took joy in that massacre. One of these things is a fact. The other is kind of true by proxy, and the third thing is something you invented in your head, almost just like Henry did. If KCD2, after spending the entire game giving heaps of nuance to every single person you meet, just painted Markvart as an evil man doing evil things because he's evil just so you can take out your video game anger on him, that would be bad, and also go against the entire principle of the game's narrative thus far. The conversation that unfolds in this room is marvelous, both in writing and in performance. I genuinely shed tears here. He tells Henry, "I remember everyone I killed. Don't you?" And no, Henry doesn't. And neither do we. That line is a gut punch, because it flips everything on its head, just like the rest of the game does. Markvart isn't cruel. He's dutiful. Maybe to a fault. He speaks about Sigismund with genuine belief, not just as a ruler, but as someone trying to bring order to chaos, to rescue a kingdom teetering on the edge of collapse. He believes Wenceslas is weak, unfit to rule. And whether or not we agree, it's clear Markvart's actions were never aimless. They were guided by conviction, by loyalty to a vision of stability that he believed in, which is more than Henry can say. Because Henry has never really had a cause. It hasn't even really been about Wenceslas. It's been personal and directionless, just revenge that's been hollowed out into habit. The man who burned his village believed in something. Henry's actions, the things he's done, the people he's killed, was all truly only ever to serve his own ends, guided by his own misguided sense of righteousness. The irony is suffocating, because throughout this game we've worked alongside men like Žižka and the Dry Devil, people who've committed acts every bit as brutal as Markvart's. Žižka butchered men out of pragmatism. The Dry Devil wanted to raise a village because someone told him to for strategy. But we justified it, because they were on our side, because it didn't happen to us. Markvart's only real sin, in our eyes, is that he made it personal. By pure circumstance. So when he asks Henry, "How can you be sure you didn't kill someone's father?" Henry falters, because he can't be sure. Not really, not after everything he's done. He's trying to process it all in real time, the cycle of violence, the collateral damage, the humanity on the other side of the sword that he rarely stopped to consider. But the game doesn't just present you with all of this, it lets you choose, the same choice you got with Istvan. And this is a damn good test of your media literacy, I'll tell you that much. Because there is only one thing you can truly do here, and I'll explain why. Markvart says, "I can see you are your father's son. He'd be proud of you." And he is being completely sincere here. That's what really got me, because if I was truly Martin's son, as Markvart himself has seen, then to strike him down in cold blood would be to spit on everything Martin stood for, everything he's been saying across this game. Henry's already given in once when he killed Istvan despite his father's voice telling him not to, and it didn't help. It didn't fix anything, it just left him emptier. So when the choice came, I walked away. Thematically, I think the only consistent options if you need a choice are to let him go or kill him with honor. But after Istvan, after seeing how hollow that kind of vengeance left Henry, there didn't seem to be anything to gain. Eric flew into a rage when Henry killed Istvan, just like Henry did in KCD1. That cycle of anger, of grief, it keeps turning, but it doesn't lead anywhere. And the battle already claimed Markvart. That arrow earlier from the Dry Devil would leave him dead by morning. What mattered was what kind of man Henry chose to be in that moment. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for peace. Maybe not for Markvart's, but for his own. Markvart is a mirror here. He represents the morality of a single man, remorseful and reflective, against the reality of his actions. And is there a difference? The more honest answer is that there might not be. Not in war. So I didn't spare Markvart. I spared Henry. This is the game's thematic crescendo, because I think everything that follows is sadly a bit of a waste. We get away, we bring back Hanush and Radzig, we have a heroic entrance and save the day like it's Helm's Deep, and essentially the game ends. The only real reflection we get on our actions is a sequence where Henry sits and speaks with the memory of his parents. They speak on the choices you made across the game, on the people you killed and robbed, on the choices you made at critical moments in the story. The game itself judges you for your actions, and you have to sit with that. It proves that despite the game allowing you to do whatever you want, freedom of choice is not freedom of consequence, and doing bad things results in Henry's soul becoming darker. It made me regret dealing with things using violence at points where I probably didn't need to, hurting people who didn't deserve it, stealing from people who didn't need to be stolen from. Usually, choice-based games let you get away with a lot of shit. Major choices will have consequences, but how you deal with those situations, the amount of people you kill, usually that doesn't matter. And sure, it doesn't matter here either. It doesn't have tangible effects on anything. You can close the game, it's irrelevant. But if you're invested in Henry, in his story and his struggle, seeing his parents walk away disappointed because you chose the easiest path that caused the most harm, that is rough. And it makes you want to do over, to try harder, to be better. It also gives you time to reflect on Henry's journey, his quest for revenge, his involvement in war, and whether his actions were right. And while I admire what it tries to do, giving Henry time to look at what he did and decide whether it was right or wrong, I think it comes off as more flippant than it does insightful. It's the game having a clear moment where choice alters the scene in an obvious way. I obviously also got the bad ending here too, which is my fault. I fucked up. I would play it differently next time. I do think this is all a little on the nose though, and I wish it had been more implied, especially after the previous scene with Markvart being so strong and so nuanced. This final scene comes down to, were you a good person or a bad person? And I think that subtracts the depth the game worked so hard to add. What I do like, though, is the scene with RETROSPECTIVE after. He feels very earnest in how he speaks to Henry, but it also seems to happen far away from public eyes. His words also, that of course your parents will be proud of you, you avenged them and saved people and made hard choices, rings pretty hollow for Henry, because despite his end goal being successful for the mission of restoring Wenceslas that he doesn't even really care about, his morals were compromised in the process, which is what his mother and Martin always truly cared about, which is why his insecurity about his actions manifested like it did. Henry just wants forgiveness, and he can only really receive that after this journey, after forgiving Markvart, and eventually, after forgiving himself. I think the game wants to hammer home that kindness and forgiveness is really at the heart of humanity, and the only way the world can be pulled out of the depths of hell is if we begin to forgive each other and ourselves, and it uses Henry as a case study to do that. After all, that's why the game is called what it is. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, and we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. The game's thesis is right there, the concept of God, of peace, not in a biblical sense, but an internal, spiritual one that pertains to us as individuals, cannot be achieved without internal and external continual forgiveness. Thanks for watching. Thank you all so much for watching this video. It's taken me an obscene amount of time to get this out. I mean, to be fair, I wasn't working on it the whole time, you know, I kind of shelved it. It was something that maybe I would put out one day, but I think when it was coming up on the 1-year anniversary and I, you know, played some of the DLC, it was kind of like, okay, I think it makes sense to make this video. And honestly, I think the prompt for it was really the games that made my 2025. I think revisiting KCD for that was like, oh, this game was great, and I loved it, and I wrote a good script for it. I should release that video. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you liked it. I really liked it. I think it's one of the best videos that I've made, to be honest. At least, you know, as far as analytical sort of stuff goes, I think. I don't know. Hopefully you enjoyed. Speaking of Patreon videos, of course, the Patreon video for this one, the companion video, is up for this on Patreon right now, on the DLC, being Brushes of Death, Legacy of the Forge, and Mysteria Ecclesiae. Every time I post a main project on here, on this channel, a companion piece goes up on Patreon as well. Like for AC2, I did, you know, a retrospective on the DLCs. For Watch Dogs, I did Bad Blood. For AC4, I did Freedom Cry, although that's now public on here anyway. And so I'm always, you know, doing bits and bobs. Like I say every fucking outro, I could not be doing what I'm doing without Patreon. It's been invaluable, and like I always say, I love the shit that I'm posting over there. I'm just about to record the monthly Patreon video as well, because as well as doing the companion pieces, every single month I do an exclusive video on Patreon as well. This one is on my changed Assassin's Creed opinions. Ooh. I was planning it to kind of coincide with the AC3 video, but obviously this took longer, and AC3 is going to be a while, so it's actually not going to coincide at all, but I mean, it'll be cool regardless. And also, a big thank you to my Patreon producers and Master Assassins. There aren't any Master Assassins anymore, but you're included in the same tier, so, you know, spiritually, those who are yet to exist. Damien the Not So Orange Gnome, GeekFam, Zedda, Arenathon, Callum Theftmas Kelly, Rolands, Luke Pierce, Dink, Super Doctor, Commenter25, and Tyler Half. thank you all so much for your continued support here on Patreon. I had the list ready this time. That doesn't often happen. I don't know if you've noticed, but I finally finished the shelves. Look, I've got shit on them. I've got the doors. I forgot what the fuck doors were. And we are rocking and rolling in gaming. I've got a lot of plans for the rest of the year in terms of stuff I want to make. Like I've been saying, Yotei video is probably going to be next. I say probably. It'll definitely be next. It's one of those videos that, given time since I sort of finished writing it and also finished Yotei, I've realized the conversation around Yotei is kind of dead, and so I'm not really expecting the video to do particularly well, but I did really like the script, so I'd like to put it out there. I think what I'll probably do in terms of the edit is maybe try to be a bit less like specific and perfectionist about the edit, just so I can get the script out there. You know, it comes together really nicely and still conveys, you know, what I'm saying. And, you know, it will still be edited well. It's just by my insanely high standards, it'll be a little bit lower, maybe. I don't need to, you know, cut every 2 to 3 seconds. I can maybe let something, you know, let a clip run for 10 seconds or so, maybe. You know, I think it would help me in the edit a little bit. But after that, it is full steam ahead on Assassin's Creed 3. I'll get to fully getting through my backlog of books that I got to read. I will get to playing the game. I will get to writing about the game. And that's going to be a hell of a project. But what better way to celebrate 1,000 patrons than a fucking AC3 video? I'm actually genuinely very much looking forward to it. I think it's exactly the right time to be making it too. Just feels great. I'm looking forward to putting that out there. And there are some other things, like there might be another like smaller video or maybe 2 before the AC3 video after Yotei, but I mean, who knows? That's yet to be seen, but it will be a long project, so maybe there'll be something else. And then it's kind of like free reign on a bunch of stuff, so it's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to making more and doing more, and yeah, it should be cool. And everything that I'm doing on Patreon, I'm always really proud of. So, you know, that's really exciting too. There's lots of stuff. Like I recently did last month was random game review, which was a ton of fun. I love doing that. I can't wait to do another one where I spin a wheel for a console, then spin the console wheel for the game, and it's just a random fucking game. I have to play it and then write up a review for it, turn it into a short like 15-20 minute video. So that's fun. It's been fun. I am really enjoying making stuff again. I want to say as well, for everybody that watches to the end of the outro segment, a big thank you to all the nice comments that I got on the games that made my 2025. There was a lot of people that left some really nice supportive words, given, you know, what I talked about that I was going through last year. And, you know, things aren't completely 100%, but like I said in that video, I'm doing a lot better, and it means the world to have, you know, so many people leave such nice supportive comments. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for continuing to watch my stuff and support me and allow me to do this. It's kind of crazy because I really love it, and I've kind of had this new burst of passion for creating again. It was really fun to put this video together. There was like no point during the process of editing or writing this video or anything where, like, there was points where I was a little bit stressed because I wanted to get it finished, I wanted to get it out. I found last year there was a bunch of points with projects where I just didn't want to do it anymore. I just couldn't. Didn't have any motivation. I didn't feel like it. With this one, I just did not feel that. I was just loving it. I was loving making it and putting it together. I'm really proud of it, and I'm just happy to put it out there. And I feel like the same is going to go for the Yotei video, and as well, obviously, Assassin's Creed 3. That'll be a big one. And I'm documenting my whole journey through making the AC3 video for Patreon, like a behind-the-scenes sort of documentary-style type, like video log type thing. So there's that'll be on Patreon if you want it, and maybe I'll put that out to the public at some point because it's quite a cool one, and I think it'd be nice to share it with more people. But for now, not for now, for then, whenever it comes out, it'll be on Patreon. Anyways, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for watching this, and thank you for joining me, and I'll see you soon for more gaming. And if you want more and you just cannot wait for my next actual video on the channel, then Patreon is where to go. And if not, then Twitch, because sometimes I go live. I'm trying to go live a bit more this year. I kind of want to... I held myself to such particular standards with live streaming where I'm like, no, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be this amount of entertaining. I've got to have this amount of energy. I think what I'd rather do is just hop on stream when I'm feeling like it, chill out for a few hours, you know, play something. Not go too hard with it. And I think it'll be more fun, and I think I'll be able to do it more frequently. So check me out on Twitch if you feel like it. Anyway, that's it from me. I will see you all soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Henry, our hero Henry, the fellow who helps his fellow man. Henry, reliable Henry, he gets the job done the best he can.